It seems like in true crime cases, the victims get forgotten while people debate how they died or who was responsible. I want to start this video by acknowledging the victim in this case, John O'Keefe, who was a Boston police officer who became a father figure to his niece and nephew after his sister died, and then her husband died, and then John lost his life on January 29th, 2022. Some of my subscribers asked me to do a deep dive into this case, and some people have appreciated my deep dive videos in the past on Delphi and Missy Beavers, but after spending over 600 hours in the last 3 months watching both of Karen's trials and producing this video will be my last deep dive video into a true crime case. I'm not complaining, just explaining, but I'm probably going to make less than $100 from YouTube ad revenue on this video. So earning less than $1 per hour for my 600 hours of time isn't paying my bills, and I can't do hundreds of hours of research into future cases. But I may do shorter videos on other cases. In this video, you may notice that some of the photos and PowerPoint slides that were presented at the trial are slightly off-center. That's because the courtroom projector was crooked, like some of the witnesses, so I tried my best to make it less noticeable. I know this video is really long. You can speed up YouTube videos by 1.25% to 2 times speed by clicking the wheel icon in the bottom right, select playback speed, and click a different speed. I also created chapters in this video so viewers can jump to different topics. Here is the order of topics I'm going to review: case overview, who's who, trials 1 and 2, timeline, Karen's voicemails to John, John's injuries, Karen's SUV damage, Karen's changing story, SUV and phone data, motives, lies, police corruption and incompetence, the federal investigation, evidence for and against Karen Reed's guilt, evidence for and against someone else's guilt, collision versus assault scenarios, my verdict, and finally, what's next for the case. If you're familiar with most of the details of this case, I suggest jumping to the chapters where I review the evidence against Karen or somebody else being responsible for John's death. Finally, this is called a deep dive. As I research cases, I write down all of my many thoughts about whether facts make sense or not, so I'm going to review the small details that some people seem to ignore or not question. I've tried my best to get caught up on all the details of this case, but I'm not reviewing absolutely everything about the case in this video. It would just take too long. Just a warning, there are some curse words in this video, courtesy of a drunk Karen Reed. So if you have other people in the area who you don't want to hear those words, figure something out. So if you like deep dive videos into true crime, it's time to put on your scuba gear, or if you like having my voice put you to sleep without having to buy and take an Ambien pill, here we go. Before I start analyzing the evidence, I will give a brief overview of the case. John O'Keefe was born in 1975, and his nickname was JJ. He was a Boston police officer, and according to his mother, he liked sports and was great with children. In 2013 and 2014, John's sister and then his brother-in-law both died within a few months of each other, so John moved into their family home and started raising his niece and nephew. Karen Reed worked at the financial company Fidelity as an equity analyst and was also an adjunct professor at a local university. She never married or had children of her own. Karen has several problems with her health, including multiple sclerosis and also bowel issues that resulted in her colon being removed in 2009. At her arraignment, her attorney David Yannetti stated that in summer 2021, Karen was diagnosed with a brain tumor. John and Karen first met at a birthday party for John's sister in 2004. They dated for a few months and then reconnected after 2020 during the COVID pandemic after John sent Karen a message on Facebook. And they dated for about 2 years between 2020 and January 2022. On January 28, 2022, John and Karen were fighting in person, on the phone, and also over text messages about their relationship and Karen spoiling John's niece with Dunkin' Donuts for breakfast that morning. But they ended up meeting friends that night at 2 different bars as a blizzard approached the town of Canton, Massachusetts. There's debate about how many alcoholic drinks Karen had at the 2 bars. Karen said the vodka tonics at C.F. McCarthy's bar were so weak that she would pour a shot into them. She said she had 2 or 3 drinks that are being counted by police as 4 or 6 drinks, but for her last vodka tonic at C.F. McCarthy's, she poured a shot into it but did not drink it, so John told her to take it with them to Waterfall Bar. Karen said that most of the time at Waterfall, she was socializing and did not drink other than a group shot. In an interview, Karen stated, quote, "I felt fine. I felt like I was buzzed," end quote. However, at 5 a.m. on January 29th, Karen said she last saw John when she left him at Waterfall Bar, which was not true. And at 9 a.m., her blood alcohol level was between 0.078% and 0.092%. The legal limit for driving is 0.08%. A retrograde analysis put Karen's blood alcohol level between 0.14% and 0.28% at 12:45 a.m. on January 29th, 2022, which is around the time that John is thought to have died and Karen drove away from the after party at the Alberts. As the Waterfall Bar was closing around midnight, another Boston police officer named Brian Albert said his son was turning 23 at midnight, and he invited the entire group back to their house at 34 Fairview Road in Canton to celebrate. Karen drove John in her SUV and arrived outside the Alberts house at 12:24 a.m. John was found dead, covered in snow, on the lawn outside the Alberts home soon after 6 a.m. Karen has given conflicting stories, stating that she saw John walk inside the Alberts home after she told him to check if they were at the right house, but he never came out or informed her via phone or text what was going on, so she left. But she also told police that she did not stay because she had stomach issues and that she did not see John go inside. Karen has said a few conflicting things that don't correspond to data evidence or eyewitnesses. The prosecution accused Karen of angrily traveling in reverse in her SUV at 24 miles per hour after John got out of her car due to an argument, and she hit him with her right rear taillight, which caused him to fall and fatally injure his head. 9 people inside the Alberts party and 3 people parked outside have said John and Karen never went inside the house. But Karen's defense team claimed that John did go inside and was killed in a fight and also bitten by the homeowner's dog. For people who are not familiar with this case, here is a quick overview of some of the most notable people in this case. I'll start with a list of people who were at the Waterfall Bar. Brian Albert, he was a Boston police sergeant and also the homeowner at 34 Fairview Road, which is where the after party was held. At the Waterfall, he was joined by his wife, Nicole, his daughter, Caitlin, and for a short amount of time, Caitlin's boyfriend, Tristan Morris. Brian's brother, Chris Albert, was also there with his wife, Julie. Chris and Julie have a son named Colin Albert. At the time of John's death, Colin was a senior in high school, so he was not at the Waterfall Bar, but it was a Friday night, and he was out drinking elsewhere with his friends and stopped by the Alberts house to wish his cousin Brian Jr. a happy 23rd birthday at midnight. Although Colin has been accused of being John's killer by Karen's defense team and also people online, he left the Alberts house around 12:10 a.m. while John and Karen were still at Waterfall. Also at the bar was Jen McCabe. Her sister is Nicole Albert, who owns 34 Fairview Road. Jen was also good friends with John O'Keefe and helped him out with his niece. Jen was at the Waterfall with her husband Matt. Brian Higgins is an ATF agent and a friend of the Alberts and also John and Karen. 2 weeks before John died, Karen initiated a kiss with Higgins as she walked him out of John's house after watching a football game. Also at the Waterfall Bar was a couple who were friends with the McCabes, Karina and Nicholas Kolokithis. And lastly, around 11 p.m., John and Karen arrived at the Waterfall Bar after they came from C.F. McCarthy's. As midnight approached, the group was invited back to the Alberts to celebrate Brian Jr.'s birthday, but Julie and Chris Albert went home, and neither did Karina or Nicholas. Around 12:24 a.m., there were 9 people inside 34 Fairview Road when John and Karen pulled up outside. Inside the Alberts house were Brian, his wife Nicole, his daughter Caitlin, and his son Brian Albert Jr. Since earlier in that night, Brian Jr. had been hanging out with several friends, including Sarah Levinson and Julie Nagel, who were still hanging out when the group from the Waterfall arrived. Also, Brian Higgins came, and Jen and Matt McCabe. As I mentioned earlier, Colin Albert left at 12:10 a.m., and at that time, John and Karen were captured on surveillance video at the Waterfall Bar. Caitlin's boyfriend Tristan showed up around 2 a.m. to pick her up as the snowstorm got worse.
From your discussions with Caitlin, what was the reason that you went back to 34 Fairview to pick her up and bring her home?
Objection.
Well, allow it. Why'd you do that?
Well, she's high maintenance. I didn't really want to have to deal with her.
It's also important to note that there were 3 people outside the Alberts house in a pickup truck. After they left the Waterfall Bar, Karen drove on Cedar Crest and missed the left turn onto Fairview, so she had to turn around in a driveway a little bit past that. When Karen got back to that intersection, on the opposite side of the road was a pickup truck driven by Ricky D'Antano, and his passengers were Heather Maxson and her boyfriend, Ryan Nagel. They were also driving to the Alberts house to pick up Ryan's sister, Julie, and Ricky turned onto Fairview right behind Karen's SUV. And all three of them testified that he parked at the Alberts driveway, and Karen parked further up. Despite Karen's statement that she was the one who parked at the driveway, and then John got out and she saw him walk up the driveway into the Alberts house, but we'll get to that later. There were a lot of witnesses at both of Karen's trials, and I don't want to waste a lot of time listing every single one of them, but for people new to the case, here's a few more people you should be aware of. Michael Proctor was a state trooper who lost his job after the first trial. He was the case investigator and wrote inappropriate text messages about Karen, and people have accused him of tampering with evidence and framing Karen. Kerry Roberts, she helped John take care of his nephew because they were friends since high school, and she had a son around the same age as John's nephew. Kerry was the person who drove Karen and Jen to the Alberts house at 6 a.m. when Karen found John's body in the snow. Judge Beverly Cannoni was the judge for both trials. In the United States, most states are referred to as states, but a few, including Massachusetts, are referred to as a commonwealth. So you might hear the term the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, it means the state. Also, a lot of people from that area seem to refer to Massachusetts as Mass, and they say they're from Canton, Mass, because apparently it's hard to pronounce the full word. Adam Lally was the assistant district attorney who handled Trial 1, and he also helped out a little bit in Trial 2. But Trial 2 was mostly handled by Special Assistant District Attorney Hank Brennan, who previously was a defense attorney who represented the infamous mob boss Whitey Bulger. And finally, Karen's defense attorneys were Alan Jackson, Robert Alessi, David Yannetti, and Elizabeth Little. Also, 34 Fairview Road is referenced a lot in this case. That is the address of Brian and Nicole Albert's home, where they had the after party and John's body was found on the lawn. I uploaded a separate 7-hour video summarizing the testimony of every single witness from both trials. So in this video, I'm not really going to do a summary of what happened at both trials, but I do reference a lot of the evidence and testimony in other parts of this video. Karen's first trial in spring of 2024 ended in a mistrial when the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict. Karen had 3 charges against her: second-degree murder, motor vehicle manslaughter while driving under the influence, and finally, leaving the scene of a collision causing injury or death. There was some debate that the judge mishandled the verdict and Karen should not have been retried for the same 3 charges, but she was. According to reports, 8 members of the jury from Trial 1 initially voted that Karen was guilty of manslaughter while operating a vehicle under the influence. 4 of the 12 jurors wanted to vote not guilty. 1 year later, Karen's second trial resulted with only a conviction for drunk driving, and she was found not guilty of causing John's death. Several people online created timelines, so thanks to them for sharing their research. I added my own updates, but even though this is a deep dive video, I'm not going to review all 278 rows documenting different events that occurred. In my spreadsheet, I color-coded the rows in green or blue. I'm only going to review the events in green, which I think are the most important to people who are new to the case to be aware of as you try to gather facts. If you want to pause, you can read the events in blue that I don't think are essential to know. However, if you do already know most of the case facts, I suggest you skip this section of my video because there is no analysis. I will highlight the row that I'm reviewing just so it's easier to follow along. You can see there are 3 columns: date, time, and event. All of these cover Friday, January 28th, and Saturday, January 29th. So on January 28th, it was a Friday. All day long, Karen called John 18 times, but he only answered 3 times. Several times, John texted Karen in frustration to stop calling because his niece, nephew, and father were around, and he did not want to talk. So there were many text messages between the 2 of them about their relationship, but I'm only including a few below. During the morning hours, after speaking on the phone for 20 minutes, Karen texted John, quote, "You have really hurt me this time," end quote. The topic appeared to be John taking care of his niece and nephew, and he apologized for saying rude things after Karen took John's niece to Dunkin' Donuts for breakfast. John said he was not built to be a parent, and they had another 50-minute call. Around midday, Karen texted John to be proud of himself. At 2:16 p.m., Karen texted that she was unhappy with what John said earlier and did not feel like coming over again. John apologized, and she asked if he liked someone else, which would explain his recent behavior. John said no, but things between them hadn't been great for a while, as they often argued. 2:34 p.m., John rejected some calls from Karen and texted her to stop calling because his niece was nearby. 3:40 p.m., Karen texted John, quote, I am paranoid now that everything I do with them is problematic, so rather see you for a minute without kids around, end quote. Any grammatical errors you see in this video are not me. I have a degree in English. I'm blaming all these other people for misspelling words and other stuff. At 5:04 p.m., Karen texted John, quote, I think it's clear me around with the kids around is slowly killing our relationship, and our relationship is much more important to me, end quote. 5:14 p.m., Karen texted John, quote, I know your heart isn't in this anymore. I've felt it for a while, and especially lately. I am willing to try more, but not if you approaching the point of indifference. If you want me to come up and you can head out for a while, then say so when you know what your father is doing, end quote. At various times that day, there was back and forth about John not accepting Karen's Facebook friend request after they had been going out for 2 years, and he replied that she unfriended him last year. There was a lot of animosity in tone of John's text message replies, and Karen was frustrated at the way John treated her and his apparent disinterest in their relationship and their future as a couple. 7:06 p.m., John texted Karen that he was headed out and asked what her plans were. Karen talked about a plumber at her house. I never saw if it was confirmed to be true that Karen had a plumber at her house or if she was lying to John. Does anybody watching know the truth? I must know the truth about Richie the plumber. 7:37 p.m., John and his friend Mike Camerano arrived at C.F. McCarthy's bar in Canton. At 8:51 p.m., Karen arrived, and there seemed to be a warm greeting between John and Karen. 10:29 p.m., Karen was served her 7th alcoholic drink, although she debates the total number because she poured shots. At some point between 10:30 and 11 p.m., Colin Albert was dropped off at Brian Albert's house at 34 Fairview Road to celebrate his cousin Brian Jr.'s 23rd birthday at midnight. 10:54 p.m., Karen and John arrived at Waterfall Bar. 11:54 p.m., Colin texted Allie McCabe, who is Jen McCabe's daughter, quote, you can get me now, end quote, but she was driving other high schoolers home, and they agreed she would pick him up after. 11:58 p.m., John paid for drinks at Waterfall, while Brian Higgins and the Alberts left the bar for 34 Fairview Road. Then it turned into the next day, January 29th, which was a Saturday. Between 12:09 to 12:11 a.m., John, Karen, and the McCabes left Waterfall Bar. 12:12 a.m., Karen started her SUV. 12:14 a.m., John texted Jen, quote, where to, end quote, and then Jen called him for 44 seconds to give directions. At 12:18, Jen and Matt McCabe arrived at Fairview. 22 seconds later, John called Jen and they talked for 36 seconds to get further directions. 12:19, John used the Waze app for directions. 12:20, Higgins texted John, quote, you coming here? With 3 question marks, end quote. According to John's phone, between 12:11 and 9 seconds and 12:21 and 5 seconds, John took 170 steps. Between 12:21 and 10 seconds and 12:24 and 22 seconds, John's phone moved 87 meters, 80 steps, and climbed up or down 3 flights of stairs. However, at 12:22 and 14 seconds, John's phone showed it was on stairs, but he was in Karen's car a half a mile away from the Alberts' house in an area with changing elevation that registered as climbing stairs when the elevation changed about 10 feet. 12:23 a.m., Ryan Nagel turned on Fairview right after Karen did, and he said around that time he texted his sister, Julie, that he had arrived. 12:24 and 26 seconds, John closed the Waze app. At that time, John's phone location was approaching the Alberts driveway while driving 17 miles per hour. 12:24 and 38 seconds, Karen's SUV parked at 34 Fairview Road in front of the house, not the driveway. 12:24 and 59 seconds, John's phone unlocked via Face ID, which is when you have to hold your phone up to your face to unlock it. 12:25 and 8 seconds, John viewed the text message from Higgins, and 1 second later, he locked his phone. 12:27 and 33 seconds, Jen texted John, here, with a question mark and exclamation point. 12:27 and 45 seconds, John's phone was unlocked via Face ID. 12:27 and 48 seconds, John read Jen's text message, here. 2 seconds later, John locked his phone. 12:29 and 37 seconds, John's phone was in a Doppler pocket state, which means his phone camera was blocked. 12:29 and 42 seconds, John's phone noted Doppler pocket state cleared. 2 seconds later, phone records showed that Jen called John. It was listed as answered for 7 seconds. However, Jen denied this phone call, and other calls that she apparently made to John over the next 20 minutes occurred. This next time is unknown. Ryan Nagel and his 2 friends left Fairview, and as they were driving by, they only saw a female in the driver's seat of Karen's SUV. They noted her interior dome light was on. They said her car was down by the flagpole. 12:30 a.m., John's phone disconnected from Karen's SUV Bluetooth. For people who are not familiar with technology, that's like a wireless network. The next event was the time of the alleged collision between John and Karen's SUV, according to Dr. Welcher, based on trigger event 1162-2. The original time was 12:31 and 38 seconds to 12:31 and 43 seconds. However, after trial 1, there were some adjustments made to sync up the time on Karen's SUV with the time on John's cell phone. So the adjusted time of the alleged collision was adjusted to sometime between 12:32 and 4 seconds and 12:32 and 12 seconds. 12:31 and 47 seconds, Jen texted John, "Pull behind me." 9 seconds later, between 12:31 and 56 seconds and 12:32 and 16 seconds, John's phone moved 25 meters or 85 feet while he took 36 steps. During this time frame, at 12:32 and 4 seconds, John's phone was unlocked via Face ID. 2 seconds later, John read Jen's text that said, "Pull behind me." 3 seconds later, at 12:32:09, John's phone is locked for the final time using the lock button. 7 seconds later, at 12:32 and 16 seconds, it was the end of John's phone movement. The final data for John's phone was at 12:33 and 14 seconds, which was the start of the pocket state, which means the camera was blocked, until 6:15 a.m. when John's body was found. Karen called John 6 times between 12:33 and 35 seconds and 12:36 and 9 seconds. 12:36 and 39 seconds, Karen connected to the Wi-Fi at John's house. 1 second later, Karen called John. At 12:37 and 8 seconds, Karen called John with voicemail number 1, screaming, Karen called John another 4 times between 12:38 and 21 seconds and 12:39 and 37 seconds. 12:40 and 31 seconds, Jen texted John, "Hello." 12:40 and 43 seconds, Karen called John again. At 12:41 and 10 seconds and 12:41 and 59 seconds, Jen called John. The phone calls showed as missed. 12:42 and 8 seconds, Karen turned off her SUV. However, this seems to be the unadjusted SUV time. The actual time may be 21 to 29 seconds later. As far as I know, the experts at the trial only adjusted the times for the 3-point turn and Karen driving in reverse at a fast speed outside the Alberts. I do not believe they updated all these other SUV times. 12:42 and 9 seconds, Jen texted John, "Where are you?" 12:42 and 35 seconds, Karen called John and left voicemail number 2, which was just beeping noises and Karen's shoes walking on the garage floor into John's house. At 12:43, John's phone battery temperature was 66 degrees Fahrenheit. When it was found at 6:14 a.m., it was 37 degrees Fahrenheit. 12:43 and 19 seconds, Jen called John. It was the start of a few phone calls that Jen made to John that she says she does not recall making. 12:45 and 53 seconds, Jen texted John again, "Hello." Jen called John again at 12:46, 12:47, and 12:50. 12:55 and 31 seconds, Karen texted John, "I'm going home." About 20 seconds later, she sent another text, "See you later." 12:58 and 19 seconds, Karen called John twice. 12:59 and 24 seconds, Karen called John and left voicemail number 3.
"John, I'm here with your f***ing kids. Nobody knows what the f*** you want, you f***ing pervert."
1 minute later, she called him again, followed by another call with voicemail number 4, which was 1 second with no audio. At 1:02 a.m., Karen texted John, "Your kids are cucking alone." 1:04 and 14 seconds, Karen texted John, "I'm back in Mansfield. The kids are home alone." 1:10 and 17 seconds, Karen left voicemail number 5.
"Yeah, it's 1 in the morning. I'm with your fucking niece and nephew. You fucking pervert. You're a fucking pervert."
Yeah, it's 1 in the morning. I'm with your effing niece and nephew. You effing pervert. You're effing pervert. She's sweet. Between 1:10 and 1:18, Karen called John 10 times. In between, at 1:14, she tried to call her mother, but it was not answered. 1:17 and 37 seconds, Karen called John with voicemail number 6.
John, I'm going home. I cannot babysit your niece. I need to go home. You are f***ing using me right now. You're f***ing another girl. Kim's sleeping next to me. You're a f***ing loser. F*** yourself.
John, I'm going home. I cannot babysit your niece. I need to go home. You are effing using me right now. You're effing another girl. Kaylee's sleeping next to me. You're a effing loser. F yourself. Maybe Karen can get a new job writing Hallmark greeting cards. 1:18 and 38 seconds, Karen called John again. 1:47 and 17 seconds, Jen's phone location accuracy improved, indicating that she departed 34 Fairview Road with her husband Matt, Sarah Levinson, and Julie Nagel. 2:22 and 35 seconds, Brian Albert called Brian Higgins. The duration of the call was 1 second. 17 seconds later, Brian Higgins called Brian Albert. That duration was 22 seconds. However, both men denied placing or receiving those phone calls or talking at that time. 2:27 and 40 seconds, Jen conducted internet searches on her phone for sports information related to her daughters. There were allegations that she also searched at 2:27 a.m. for how long to die in the cold, but several experts testified that search was actually at 6:23 and 6:24 a.m. in the same browser that had been open since 2:27 a.m., and a defense expert misunderstood the data. Jen did not initiate the deletion of the search. Her phone marked it as deleted. Between 3:15 and 3:30 a.m., the snowplow driver Brian Lucky Loughran claims he saw a Ford Edge car parked in front of 34 Fairview Road near the flagpole. Brian Albert owns a Ford Edge. The timeline and where Loughran was when he saw it were called into question by police. When Karen woke up, she called her mother at 4:38 a.m. It was unanswered. Between 4:38 and 14 seconds and 4:45 and 10 seconds, Karen called John 7 times. 4:42, she called her mother again. It was unanswered. 4:44 and 40 seconds, John's niece called John after Karen woke her up. 4:53, John's niece called Jen, and Karen said she last saw John at Waterfall Bar. 4:55, Julie Albert missed a call from Jen. 4:59 and 26 seconds, Jen called John. Soon after, she texted John, "Please answer," and also, "Karen is worried, we need to find you." Also at 4:59, Jen's husband Matt called John. At 5 a.m., Karen called Kerry Roberts stating, quote, "John's dead," while screaming, "Kerry, Kerry, Kerry," and then Karen hung up. 5:04 and 5 seconds, Jen called John. Also at 5:04, Karen called John, and Jen texted him, "Please answer so I know you're okay." 5:05 and 1 second, Karen called Jen. It was unanswered. 13 seconds later, Jen called Karen and told her she saw Karen's SUV outside the Alberts after they left Waterfall. That phone call lasted 43 seconds. At 5:07 and 21 seconds, Jen called her sister Nicole Albert. Phone records show it lasted 38 seconds, but both sisters said they did not actually connect over phone that morning. 5:07 and 46 seconds, Karen turned on her SUV. Soon after that, she reversed out of John's garage, lightly contacting his Chevrolet Traverse. She then drove to Waterfall and other areas of Canton for 30 minutes before arriving unannounced at the McCabe's. Jen called John 3 times between 5:08 and 5:14. At 5:11 and 32 seconds, Katie Camerano called John. 5:16 and 18 seconds, Jen called Karen and they spoke for about a minute and a half. 5:16 and 54 seconds, Kerry called John. At 5:19 and 57 seconds, Kurt Roberts called John. He is Kerry's husband and John's friend. Karen called John 13 times between 5:21 and 28 seconds and 5:36 and 29 seconds. At 5:23 and 26 seconds, Karen left John voicemail number 7, and instead of sounding angry like her prior voicemails, she sounded more scared, asking, "John, where the F are you?" 5:25, Jen called John, and again at 5:31. 5:32 and 37 seconds, Jen called Karen and spoke for about a minute. About a minute later, Jen called Tom Beatty. It was not answered. He was John's friend, and Jen thought John was possibly staying at his house. 5:39 and 10 seconds, Jen left her home after Karen showed up unannounced. and Jen drove Karen's SUV to John's, and Kerry drove behind them. 5:46 and 5 seconds, Jen's phone arrived at John's house at 1 Meadows Avenue. 5:52 and 45 seconds, Karen, Jen, and Kerry left John's house, but the Ring video is missing. Karen admitted showing them her broken taillight and picking pieces out and then dropping them on John's driveway. 6:03 and 2 seconds, Karen called John and left voicemail number 8. That message starts with Karen screaming in the distance after finding John's body covered in snow near the Alberts flagpole. It seems like Karen called John as they approached the Alberts house in Kerry's car, and then did not hang up and left her phone in the back seat. It also captured Jen's 911 phone call, which happened at 6:03 and 47 seconds. 6:04 and 1 second, Kerry found John's phone under his body. 6:07 and 42 seconds, Jen called her sister Nicole Albert, who lives at 34 Fairview. The phone record showed it lasted 7 seconds. At 6:08 and 17 seconds, Jen called Nicole again, and it lasted 8 seconds. Jen's phone log showed both phone calls were answered, but Jen testified that she did not speak to Nicole on the phone that morning because Nicole did not answer her calls. There is debate about the reliability of phone records without having the receiver's call logs, and Nicole did not have to turn her phone records over. 6:10 and 4 seconds, Canton police officer Stephen Sarif was the first police officer to arrive. 6:23 a.m., Jen called her brother-in-law, Brian Albert, who lives at 34 Fairview Road. It was not answered. 6:23 and 49 seconds, Jen's internet search for how long does it take to digest food. 2 seconds later, Jen's internet search for how long tie-dye in CIKD. She was outside trying to type how long to die in the cold. 6:24 and 18 seconds, Jen's other internet search for Hoslong to die in cold. Karen called her father 7 times between 6:30 and 48 seconds and 7:11 and 36 seconds. 6:34 and 43 seconds, Jen walked up the Alberts driveway to enter her sister's home at the request of Officer Lenk. 6:35 and 3 seconds, Jen called her husband Matt and talked for 19 seconds. 6:35 and 33 seconds, Jen climbed 1 flight of stairs, according to her watch data, to wake up her sister Nicole and her brother-in-law Brian. After waking them up, they walked downstairs and talked to police. 6:44 a.m., Trooper Yuri Buchanan received a phone call regarding a male found unresponsive in the snow, and then he called Trooper Proctor. 6:47, John's body arrived at Good Samaritan Medical Center with a core body temperature of 80.1 degrees Fahrenheit. 6:50 and 57 seconds, Karen received a phone call from John's sister-in-law, Erin O'Keefe. They talked for 4 minutes. At 7:26, Karen was admitted to Good Samaritan. 7:50 a.m., John was pronounced dead by Dr. Justin Rice. 8:23 and 10 seconds, Canton Police Lieutenant Charles Ray performed a wellness check for John's niece and nephew at his house. Ray's dash cam shows Karen's SUV right taillight is missing the red cover. Ray did not go near the SUV. Around 8:30 a.m., Julie Albert arrived at 34 Fairview Road to drop off Dunkin' Donuts for Brian Albert Jr.'s birthday. At that time, the people inside told her there had been an accident with John. There were no first responders, police, or police vehicles outside. Inside the house were Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, Jen and Matt McCabe, and Brian Higgins trying to make sense of what could have happened to John, although some people think they were conspiring. 8:59 and 34 seconds, Jen called Officer Lenk and asked him to return to 34 Fairview Road because she recalled that Karen told an EMT that she hit John. 9:08, Karen's blood was drawn at the Good Samaritan Medical Center, and the result was 0.093%. The legal limit is 0.08%. At 9:15, Troopers Proctor and Buchanan arrived at the Canton Police Department. 10:36 and 28 seconds, Paul and Peggy O'Keefe arrived at John's house from the hospital. 10:41, Buchanan called the medical examiner's office and said the case was being treated as suspicious due to a domestic situation that happened after they left the bar. John was possibly struck in the face with a cocktail glass. 10:55 and 3 seconds, Jen received a phone call from Trooper Proctor, and they talked for a minute. 11:16, Jen left 34 Fairview Road and arrived at her house at 11:22. At 11:30, Proctor and Buchanan interviewed Jen, Matt, and Brian Albert separately at her home. 12:04, Karen, her father, and her brother arrived at John's house after leaving the hospital. 12:35, Karen turned on her SUV. After being there about 21 minutes, Karen turned on her SUV to leave. 1:04, Jen called Ashley, who was the mother of John's niece's friend, Bella. Ashley was also John's ex-girlfriend, who Jen referenced on the phone when giving directions to John and Karen. At 1:27, Karen Googled DUI attorneys. DUI is driving under the influence of alcohol. 1:36, Karen received another phone call from Jen's sister-in-law, Erin O'Keefe. In one of her phone calls with Erin, Karen said she had to remember the bad times so she would not be sad that John was dead. Karen turned off her SUV after they arrived at her parents' house in the town of Dayton. 2:22, Jen called Kerry, and they talked for 11 minutes. At some point, John's mother asked Jen and Kerry to write a timeline of what happened that morning so they would not forget. At 2:31, troopers called Dayton patrolman Nicholas Barros to say they were on their way to retrieve Karen's SUV. 2:32, Massachusetts State Police Lieutenant Brian Tully called Kevin O'Hara to request approval to start the evidence search at 34 Fairview Road by the CERT team. At 3:57, Brian Higgins was using a key card at Canton Police Department, where he had an office but he was not officially working on that Saturday. 4:12, Karen's SUV was towed from her parents' driveway. At 4:54 was the start of state troopers arriving at 34 Fairview Road to search for evidence. At 4:56, Lieutenant Kevin O'Hara arrived at 34 Fairview. At 5:20 p.m., the CERT team prepared for the search. Over the next few minutes, other troopers arrived, and at 5:24, the search of 34 Fairview Road began. 5:31, Karen's SUV arrived at the Canton Police Department Sally Port Garage. 5:45, the first piece of taillight was discovered in the CERT team search. A half hour later, at 6:15, the CERT team search ended after finding a few pieces of taillight, John's one sneaker, and a broken drinking glass. And finally, later that night, starting a few minutes before 11 p.m., Michael Proctor was exchanging messages in a group chat with his friends. One of his friends replied, quote, "I'm sure the owner of the house will receive some end quote. Proctor responded, quote, "Nope, homeowner is a Boston cop too," end quote. Proctor also wrote about Karen, quote, "She waffled him. I looked at his body at the hospital. He was banged up," end quote. His friend replied, "Did he get beat up?" Proctor replied, "Nope." He also wrote, quote, "That's what I initially thought after talking to Canton paramedics. Then I saw the guy," end quote. Proctor's friend asked about Karen, "Is she hot at least?" Proctor wrote another message apparently about Brian Albert, the homeowner, quote, "From all accounts, he didn't do a thing wrong," end quote. Proctor also wrote a few messages about Karen that were so rude I'm not going to actually reenact them. When Proctor's friend wrote a text about Karen, quote, "Oh, she's skating," end quote, which means Karen would not get in trouble, Proctor replied, "Zero chance she's skating. She's effed," end quote. In this section, I'm going to review all 8 voicemails that Karen left for John after she drove away from the Albert's house until she found his body. Just a reminder, 12:32 and 16 seconds a.m. was the end of John walking for 20 seconds after he got out of Karen's SUV, after her SUV had been parked outside by the flagpole, for 7 minutes after they arrived without either one of them getting out. Karen called John 6 times between 12:33 and 35 seconds and 12:36 and 9 seconds. John never answered and Karen did not leave a voicemail. Until her 7th phone call at 12:37 and 8 seconds. Karen screamed, This was the 8th phone call Karen made since 12:33 a.m. after she left Fairview, and 5 minutes after John's phone never moved again. So what happened between Waterfall Bar and the Albert's house that changed from John and Karen being lovey-dovey to Karen screaming that she hated John? The drive from Waterfall was Karen's first opportunity to be alone with John since they fought over text earlier in the day. This is a major piece of evidence that shows Karen was angry when she drove away after John got out of her car. Was she angry enough to hit her foot on the gas pedal to drive in reverse to catch up to John after he got tired of arguing with her in the car? At 12:41 and 35 seconds, Karen left voicemail number 2.
The voice message at 12:41:35.
However, she did not talk. It only captured the sound of her SUV beeping noises while pulling into John's garage, and then her shoes walking on the garage floor into John's house. This was the 6th phone call since Karen connected to John's home Wi-Fi at 12:36 a.m. Why did Karen call so many times while sitting in her car? To not wake up John's niece? Why was there an unresolved discussion after John got out of her SUV that Karen needed to call so many times? Why didn't she hang up the phone when it went to voicemail? Since first connecting to John's Wi-Fi, Karen had time to get out and look at the back of her car, then go back in her car and call John. The Ring video is missing, showing Karen parked in John's driveway before pulling in. In one of her various stories that is not confirmed by evidence, Karen said John went in the Alberts but never told her it was okay to come in, and she left angry. But why would she not drive the 4 minutes back to the Alberts house to speak to John instead of calling him repeatedly? Also, her phone connected to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36. Why did it take 6 minutes for her to pull into John's garage? 12:55 and 31 seconds, Karen texted John, "I'm going home. See you later." 12:59 and 24 seconds, Karen left voicemail number 3. John's nephew was sleeping at someone else's house.
John, I'm dealing with your fucking kids. Nobody knows where the fuck you are, you fucking pervert.
Karen said nobody knows where the F you are, but Karen had not contacted anyone else to be aware that nobody else knew where John was. She just saw him get out of her car at the Alberts house 30 minutes earlier. Also, why would she be affectionate with John at the bars, but then call him a pervert? At 1 o'clock and 49 seconds, Karen left voicemail number 4. That was 1 second with no audio. A minute later, she texted John, "Your kids are cucking alone." However, John's nephew was not home at this time. 1:04:14, Karen texted John, "I'm back in Mansfield. The kids are home alone." However, Karen lied. She was at John's house, not her house. At 1:10 and 17 seconds, Karen left voicemail number 5.
Yeah, it's 1 in the morning. I'm with your fucking niece and nephew. You fucking pervert. You're a fucking pervert.
Listening to these voicemails, it's clear to me Karen is mentally unstable, a mean drunk, or both. At 1:14, Karen called her mother, but she did not answer, because that's when people are usually sleeping. So what was so important that Karen needed to wake her up? 1:17 and 37 seconds, Karen left voicemail number 6.
John, I'm going home. I cannot babysit your niece. I need to go home. You are fucking using me right now. You're fucking another girl. Kim's sleeping next to me. You're a fucking loser. Fuck yourself.
What kind of person would speak like that when a teenager is sleeping right next to them? Karen is the one who is a loser. She's also a liar because John's niece said she went to sleep at 11 p.m. and Karen woke her up around 4:30 a.m. There was no proof John was with another woman. Karen dropped him off at a party they were both invited to. She is the one who decided not to go inside, and her various explanations don't align with actual data evidence and 12 witnesses. 1:18 and 38 seconds, Karen called John but did not leave a voicemail, and it seems like she went to sleep after that. After 4:30 a.m., Karen was texting and calling John, but did not leave him another voicemail until 5:23 and 26 seconds. Karen's anger turned into fear. Was she afraid the reason John was not answering was because she hit him? And finally, at 6:03 and 2 seconds, Karen left voicemail number 8, which captured Karen, Jen, and Kerry discover John's body and Jen's 911 phone call.
Yes, I need someone to take over. 34 beautiful Vietnam with a anti-code no. Yeah. Okay, I know. Where's the blankets? I don't see the blankets, Harry. Yes, I need somebody. No.
This was Karen's first phone call to John in 27 minutes, just as they were about to find his body. Why did Karen not hang up this call and the one in John's garage? Was it strategic to capture that audio of Karen pulling home and also finding his body? Next, I'm going to review John's injuries. Dr. Irene Scortibello conducted his autopsy. She determined John's cause of death was blunt impact trauma to the head, compounded by hypothermia, but she could not determine the circumstances that caused those injuries and if it was accidental or not. There were no signs of a severe physical altercation, like defensive wounds, broken fingernails, nose, teeth, or eye sockets. John had a laceration at the back right of his head, with multiple skull fractures and brain hemorrhaging, all consistent with blunt impact trauma. He had black eyes and bleeding beneath both eyelids. The skull fractures appeared to radiate, which can result in a bruising response known as raccoon eyes. A small cut above his right eye, superficial scratches and abrasions on the left side of his nose, superficial abrasions on his right arm, ranging from small scrapes to roughly 7 centimeter linear marks, scratches on his left hand, a cut on his tongue, a small abrasion on the side of his right knee, bruising and contusions on the back of his right hand, possibly from paramedics inserting an IV in his hand, 2 fractured ribs near the sternum, likely due to CPR. And finally, regarding his alcohol consumption, he had a level of 0.21 grams per deciliter in his blood and 0.28 grams per deciliter in his vitreous humor, which is fluid drawn from behind the eyes. Various experts offered different testimony on John's injuries. Most noted that pedestrian and vehicle collisions usually have bone fractures and bruising, but John did not have injuries consistent with being hit by a car, although reverse sideswipe collisions were not that common. Dr. Sheridan classified John's right arm injuries as abrasions from friction before John died. Some experts said his skull injury could have been caused by frozen grass. Others said it required a harder surface or ridged surface. Some said the injuries on John's right arm were animal or dog bites. Others said they were not. But no dog DNA, saliva, or hair was found on John. Only pig DNA, which could have been from someone eating food and touching his sweatshirt, or a dog eating a pig ear dog snack. Other than John's right arm, there were no other injuries that resembled an animal attack. Dr. Renee Stonebridge analyzed John's brain and related injuries, which were acute and occurred within minutes or hours before death. Her findings supported a single impact event, like striking a curb or vehicle, rather than injuries from a prolonged assault. Some experts said John's right arm injuries could have been caused by glass or plastic, and some denied that possibility. Next, I'm going to review the damage to Karen's SUV. She had a broken rear right taillight that was noticeably damaged in home security videos at 5:07 a.m., 8:23 a.m., and 4:12 p.m. before police had a chance to touch or tamper with it. Karen admitted picking pieces out of her taillight when she showed Jen and Kerry before leaving John's house to find his body at 6 a.m. Sergeant Barrows from the Dighton Police Department gave conflicting testimony that the taillight he saw at Karen's parents' house around 4 p.m., when it was towed, did not have the same amount of damage as shown in the Canton Police Department garage photo several days later after the snow melted. But during trial number 2, when he was shown videos from earlier in the day, he agreed with the prosecution that the damage in those videos did match what he saw around 4 p.m., and those videos appeared to show the entire right side of Karen's taillight was missing, just like this February 1st Canton Police Department photo. After police collected and reconstructed the taillight pieces from outside the Alberts house, it nearly completely matched Karen's damage except the top left. Dr. Welcher proved with high-quality laser imaging and in-person measurements that Karen's taillight would not have made contact with John's SUV at 5:07 a.m., so that 1 mile per hour impact did not break Karen's taillight. Karen had no other explanation for her SUV damage. John's DNA was found on the taillight pieces, and there were red and clear plastic pieces found in his shirt that resembled Karen's taillight plastic. Also in the rear right of her SUV, there was a dent with paint chipped off that the prosecution expert said could have been from the broken drinking glass that John was holding when he exited Karen's SUV at the Alberts. John was captured on video leaving the Waterfall bar holding the glass in his right hand. There were also scuff marks on the lower right side that Dr. Welcher said could have been from John's jeans. Near the right taillight, there was one piece of hair. I think there's a possibility that that hair slid down when the snow melted after it was parked in the Canton Police garage. So if John was hit by Karen, that hair may have initially stuck further up on the car. An expert determined with 95% confidence that at least 99.895% of the population can be excluded as being a source of that hair sample. However, John O'Keefe and his maternal relatives could not. Finally, there were 5 pieces of glass found on Karen's bumper. State Police forensic scientist Christina Hanley testified the broken cup found near John did not match 2 shards of glass found on Karen's bumper. She was unable to test the other 3 pieces due to their size and condition. The broken drinking glass found near John was never fully reconstructed, so it's possible some of the pieces on her bumper matched other pieces that were never found. Prosecution expert Dr. Welcher conducted a test showing his right hand would be in a similar position to the dent, and also showed the same general area matching John's right arm injuries. But the prosecution did not prove in detail how Karen's broken taillight could have caused marks similar to the ones on John's right arm. The defense had several witnesses, including Dr. Wolf and Dr. Rentschler from the accident reconstruction firm ARCA, who originally were hired not by the defense, but the federal probe into potential police corruption that did not result in any charges. Both of those doctors testified they did not think John's right arm could have caused the taillight damage similar to Karen's damage, although their 24-mile-per-hour test did cause similar damage to the taillight, in my opinion. However, their testing did not cause holes in the test sweatshirt that was similar to John's, And they said John should have had fractures and bruising if he was hit by a car, but he did not. In their final analysis, they did not take into consideration John's DNA was found on the taillight pieces, his hair was on Karen's car, or that pieces were found in his clothing. I'll get into that more in a later section of the video. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about Karen's changing story. I'll get into this more in the section where I review evidence for and against Karen, and I went into deep detail in a separate video I made a few months ago titled Karen Reed Lie Detector Test. That originated when I was watching Karen's various TV interviews, and Homegirl cannot keep her story straight. Karen's supposed facts don't match data and a dozen witnesses' testimony, and it made my head want to explode trying to make sense of her different stories and rationale that is more like irrationale. It's hard to even keep track of Karen's various stories of what happened once she and John arrived at the Alberts house because the details always change. Karen's conflicting stories and rationale for many things leaves me wondering how she held a job at Fidelity and was a teacher, from telling stories that go against data and 12 eyewitnesses to her lack of questioning Jen McCabe and Brian Higgins, asking what could have happened to John inside the Alberts house. Her thought process is not logical or not true. Maybe she makes more sense when she's stating actual facts. On January 29th, 2022, before 5 a.m., Karen called Jen and said she got in a fight with John at the Waterfall Bar and left him there. Jen told Karen that she saw her SUV outside the Alberts house after they left Waterfall, and Karen said she wondered if she hit John and mentioned her broken taillight. At 5 a.m., Karen called Kerry and said John was dead. That was 1 hour before Karen, Jen, and Kerry found John dead. Karen said she thought he got hit by a snowplow. A few hours after John was found dead, Karen told police she had stomach issues at Waterfall Bar and dropped John off at the Alberts but did not see him go inside, and she did a 3-point turn with her car to leave. When police asked for more details, Karen ended the interview. Later that afternoon, Karen told John's sister-in-law she dropped John off at the Alberts because she did not feel like going. Then, years later, in multiple TV interviews, Karen said she parked at the Alberts driveway and wasn't sure if that was the right house, so John was going to check it out and report back. Karen said she saw John rush up the Alberts driveway and open their side door. In another story, she said she only saw him approach the door, then Karen looked at her phone. But John's phone data showed they traveled past the driveway at 17 miles per hour and came to a stop further down the street at 12:24 a.m. 3 witnesses testified they pulled onto Fairview Road right after Karen did, and they were the ones who parked at the Alberts driveway behind Karen's SUV and never saw anyone exit her car for the several minutes that they were there. Also, John's phone data never placed the center point of his location inside the Alberts home or measured John walking until 12:31 a.m., 7 minutes after his phone speed reached 0 miles per hour outside the Alberts house near the flagpole. In a TV interview, Karen said that after 2 to 3 minutes of waiting for John to update her, she called John, but he did not answer, and it made her mad. But Karen's phone data showed that 9 minutes after they parked, Karen finally contacted John for the first time since they arrived at the Alberts. But Karen connected to John's home Wi-Fi at 12:36, which proved Karen never called John while parked at the Alberts. Karen Occhio, your nose is growing. I could describe even more lies, but I'll get into that more later. Forget the Oscars. Karen deserves a Razzie Award for Worst Actress. In this next section, I'm going to review SUV and phone data. Before I get into some analysis, I just want to review John's phone data. Between 12:21 and 10 seconds and 12:24 and 22 seconds a.m., John's phone registered that it moved 87 meters, 80 steps, and 3 flights of stairs up or down. However, during that time period, at 12:22:14, John's phone showed it was on stairs, but his location was in Karen's car, a half a mile away from the Alberts home. 12:24:26, John closed the Waze navigation app while Karen's SUV was traveling 17 miles per hour approaching the Alberts house. 12:24:59, John's phone unlocked via Face ID. 12:25:08, John read the text, "You coming here?" from Brian Higgins. 1 second later, John locked his iPhone. 12:27:45, John's phone was unlocked via Face ID. 3 seconds later, John read Jen's text message that asked, "Here?" And 2 seconds after that, he locked his phone. 12:29:44, Jen called John, and the records show it was answered for 7 seconds. Jen does not recall speaking to John at this point, and I do not think that Karen has ever talked about John receiving a phone call while they were parked outside, possibly because it goes against Karen's story. At 12:30, John's phone disconnected from Karen's SUV Bluetooth. The time of the alleged collision between John and Karen has changed between Trial 1 and Trial 2. Originally, the experts said it happened between 12:31 and 38 seconds and 12:31 and 43 seconds. For Trial 2, experts compared John's phone time to the time on Karen's SUV, since they were both present when Karen did a three-point turn after she missed the turn onto Fairview. The adjusted time of the alleged collision was updated to 12:32 and 4 seconds to 12:32 and 12 seconds. Before that, at 12:31 and 47 seconds, Jen texted John, "Pull behind me." John's phone data revealed that the first time that he started walking after arriving at the Alberts was between 12:31 and 56 seconds and 12:32 and 16 seconds. His phone moved 85 feet over 36 steps. 12:32 and 4 seconds, John unlocked his phone via Face ID. 2 seconds later, he read Jen's message, "Pull behind me." 3 seconds after that, John locked his phone for the final time using the lock button. And 7 seconds after that, at 12:32 and 16 seconds, it was the end of the health event where John took his final steps. Ian Whiffen works for the company Celebrite, which is one of the most well-known digital forensics companies. He testified that John's phone had location data enabled, but Karen's did not. Whiffen shared a presentation showing that the location of John's phone on the drive from the Waterfall Bar to the Alberts house was always accurately in the road. John's phone was traveling at 17 miles per hour when he closed the Waze navigation app near the Alberts driveway and then came to 0 miles per hour a little further down the road at 12:24 a.m. The data shows a center point of John's location at different times, and depending on the accuracy and the strength of the phone signal, the center point has a radius that fluctuates. At no time on January 29th was the center point of John's phone located inside the Alberts house. There were a few data points where the signal strength was not good, so the outside of the radius did include a portion of the front left of the Alberts home. But as evidenced by these slides, which showed that for each second of data, for the 5 seconds between 12:38 and 16 seconds and 12:38 and 21 seconds, John's phone had the same latitude and longitude, which means it registered at the same exact position. But the only thing that changed was the signal strength as it got better. So at one point in time, the signal strength was up to 18 meters outside the center point. But as each of the next 5 seconds progressed, the signal strength improved and narrowed the outside of that center point to a more reliable accuracy of 7 meters, which is about 22 feet. When the signal strength of John's phone was at its best, it did not include the possibility that John's phone was in the Alberts house. So if people want to think that John was ever inside the Alberts house, they have to rely on the less reliable data and ignore the more reliable data. On this map, the black radius shows the time frame 12:53:07 to 12:53:11 when John's phone never moved, and the more accurate signal strength showed the radius did not include the Alberts house, but did include the flagpole and a little bit of the street. Between 12:21:10 and 12:24:37 a.m., John's phone recorded steps taken and 3 flights of stairs climbed or descended, and people think that means that John was in the Alberts house getting attacked in their basement, but phone expert Ian Whiffen tested his phone in the car in the Canton area, and it registered movement as he was driving and moving his arm and hand. And he showed that during this time period, the Waze app confirmed that John was in the car with Karen driving on the way to the Alberts. And 1 second before Karen's car came to a stop at 12:24 and 38 seconds in front of the Alberts, it registered the third and last flight of stairs because of prior elevation change. Whiffen testified that it takes about 15 to 50 seconds after the change in altitude to register the elevation change on the phone. After parking, John's phone did not register any steps until 7.5 minutes later for 20 seconds between 12:31:56 and 12:32:16. It measured 36 steps over about 85 feet. The location was near the flagpole and the street, and it never moved after 12:32:16 a.m. until John's body was found after 6 a.m. This slide shows location accuracy of 10 meters. The red circle is just to highlight the cluster of points. It's not indicating that it included the front of the Alberts house. So, if John never went in the Alberts house, how could he get attacked by people or a dog? And how is Karen telling the truth by saying she saw him walk through the front door? Whiffen also proved, along with expert Jessica Hyde, that Jen McCabe searched for how long it takes to die in the cold at 6:23 and 6:24 a.m., not at 2:27 a.m. like the defense and their expert claimed. 2:27 a.m. was when Jen opened the internet browser on her phone. She looked at some websites for her daughter's sports teams, but she never closed it when she went to sleep. And when Karen asked her outside the Alberts house to look for information on the internet about hypothermia, that is when Jen accessed that same internet tab on her phone that she initially opened at 2:27 a.m. In the courtroom, Ian Whiffen demonstrated how this happens. Also, John's phone battery temperature decreased after he left Waterfall Bar from 82 degrees Fahrenheit to 43 degrees Fahrenheit when his body was found, indicating he never went inside a warm home. Next, I'll review some of Karen's SUV data. Karen's SUV records data for 5 seconds before and 5 seconds after what is known as a trigger event. In this case, there were 2 trigger events that happened between Karen driving from Waterfall to 34 Fairview Road. Trigger number 1 was a 3-point turn in reverse after Karen missed the left turn onto Fairview Road. Trigger number 2 was when the gas pedal throttle on Karen's SUV reached 30%, which started recording data for 5 seconds before that and 5 seconds after that point. Prosecution expert Shannon Burgess compared the 3-point turn after Karen missed the left turn onto Fairview Road to match the timestamp on Karen's SUV with the time on John's phone, since they both recorded that same maneuver. It was noted that Karen's SUV time appeared to be 21 to 29 seconds behind John's phone time, which was more reliable. For trigger number 2, this is when the prosecution claimed Karen hit John. First, Karen's SUV was traveling forward 34 feet at 13 miles per hour, 5 seconds before the trigger of 30% gas pedal throttle. Then, Karen put her SUV in neutral, then went in reverse 53 feet from where it originally was at the start of the event, which equaled 87 feet total in reverse, during the 10 seconds of data. When the data stopped recording 5 seconds after the throttle hit 30%, Karen's SUV was moving in reverse at 23.9 miles per hour, and the throttle was now at 74%. Experts testified that the speed likely kept increasing after the data stopped recording. There was some evidence that the wheels on her SUV were slipping on the ground when Karen was going in reverse. That trigger event happened between 12:32:04 and 12:32:12. 12:32:09 was the last time John locked his phone. John took his last step at 12:32 and 16 seconds a.m. Defense expert Matthew DeSogra indicated shorter time variances than the range of 21 to 29 seconds that Burgess stated, and he accused Burgess of failing to apply the smaller range to the SUV's trigger events, which would have meant that John used his phone after Karen's SUV went in reverse, but Burgess said DeSogra was wrong. DeSogra only reviewed the work of Burgess and did not do any testing of his own. Next, I'm going to review some alleged motives of various suspects. First, high school senior Colin Albert. Karen gave an interview to the magazine Vanity Fair, which included a section about potential suspects. The article stated, O'Keefe's alleged antagonistic relationship with Colin Albert, who lived 2 doors down from him. According to Reed, the teenager regularly dumped beer bottles and cans on the lawn. So Karen had no problem pointing a finger at a high school senior. At Karen's first trial, her defense team showed videos of Colin threatening to fight other high school kids, and also showed a February 26 photo of injuries to Colin's hand, which was nearly a month after John died, but photos from February 11th showed no marks on Colin's hands. Colin and both of his parents testified there was no real animosity with John, who brought his nephew into Colin's father's business the day he died, and then hung out with Chris Albert at Waterfall, And for trial number 2, the judge did not even allow Colin to be mentioned as a suspect because the evidence was so flimsy, because Colin was picked up around 12:10 a.m., which was the same time Karen and John were captured on video leaving the waterfall. So if Colin was not at the Alberts, how did he kill John? The next suspect, according to the defense, is Brian Albert, the homeowner at 34 Fairview Road and a Boston police officer. In that same Vanity Fair article, Karen talked about Brian Albert and said he might have simply been irritated John was given special accommodation by the Boston Police Department after his sister's death, like a desk job with flexible hours. This next quote from the article is Karen describing her opinion of Brian Albert. Quote, "I could see how someone could look at John and say, quote, I'm a real cop. I'm the head of the fugitive unit. I've been on the drug unit, the gang unit," end quote. Reed imagines to me, aka the Vanity Fair reporter. Here's a quote from Tom. Oh, look out. Like Brian Albert is going to attack and murder a man he just hugged at Waterfall Bar and hung out with at Hillside Bar a week earlier, but then, during a party for his son's 23rd birthday, Brian Albert would risk losing his police pension that he built up over 30 years working as a cop just because John had a desk job with flexible hours? That's according to Karen. I really think that Karen's brain needs to be examined by Dr. Stonebridge because her reasoning has more cracks than the San Andreas Fault. Seriously, she's tripping. The next suspect, according to Karen, her defense team, and crazy people online, is Brian Higgins. A few weeks before John died, Higgins was at John's house to watch a football game, and Karen kissed Higgins. In many text messages after that, it was shown that Higgins was cautious, trying to figure out why Karen initiated that kiss, what the status of her relationship with John was, and how the two of them would proceed. But Karen stopped replying to Higgins a few days before they saw each other at Waterfall, where they did not even speak. But Karen finally replied to Higgins' text message a few hours after John was found dead and wrote 2 words, "John died." But Karen made no attempt to find out from Higgins what could have happened inside the Alberts house. The defense tried to make it look like Higgins was so upset that Karen had not replied to his text and did not talk to him at the Waterfall Bar that he beat John up. But there was no indication that Higgins was so in love or in lust with Karen that he would kill John after hugging John at the Waterfall Bar 90 minutes earlier. Before this night, Higgins was friendly with John and offered to remove snow from his driveway. There was no animosity on the part of Higgins. The next suspect, according to the defense, is Chloe, the Alberts German Shepherd dog. The defense argued that the dog did not like people, so she only attacked John and not the 9 other people at the party. Several experts testified they thought the wounds on John's arm resembled dog bites and not from a car taillight at 24 miles per hour, but Dr. Russell admitted that Chloe's teeth did not match the pattern on John's arm, and there were no other dog bites or claw marks on John's body other than the top of his right arm, but not the bottom of his arm. Some people argue that pig DNA found on John's sleeve was from Chloe the dog eating a pig ear as a snack, but it seems unlikely that residue from a pig ear would transfer to John's shirt, but not that same dog's DNA, saliva, or hair after repeatedly biting John and causing many wounds. The Alberts testified that their son, Brian Jr., kept Chloe in his parents' room during his birthday party and forgot to let her out, so when his dad, Brian Sr., came home, he let the dog out in their backyard. She came back inside and was allowed in the kitchen area for a few minutes before she was brought back upstairs. Again, John's phone data showed that the center GPS location was never inside the Alberts house, only on their lawn near the flagpole and street, which makes it hard to get attacked by people or pets inside the house when someone never went inside the house. Finally, Karen Reed was obviously frustrated with John's lack of interest in their relationship, his hurtful words, and his unwillingness to talk on the phone about their issues until Karen finally got him alone in her car on the drive from the Waterfall Bar to the Alberts house, where they sat for 7 minutes without going into the party until John got out. Maybe Karen was not finished talking about the relationship when John got out, but several minutes later, she proved that she drove away from the Alberts house, angry with John, when she left a voicemail screaming that she effing hated him. Was Karen angry and frustrated enough at 12:32 to put her foot on the gas pedal in reverse to catch up to John so she could finish talking to him about her emotional needs about their relationship. So if nobody inside the house caused John's injuries and Karen's SUV did not, is there another way that John got his injuries and died? John had vomit in his mouth as well as blood and vomit on his boxer shorts. I'm not sure when he vomited or how it ended up on his boxers. Does anybody watching have any insight into how that might have happened? Did John vomit when he got out of Karen's car? Or did sustaining his head injury cause him to vomit? If John did not get hit by Karen's car, some people may argue he got punched in the stomach during a fight and it made him vomit, but he had no corresponding injury to his stomach. I tried to think of a few scenarios where Karen maybe dropped John off, despite the people in the pickup truck saying she did not, and John vomited, maybe slipped on the snow, hit his head possibly on the fire hydrant, which I don't think the police even swabbed for DNA or blood. And then I wondered, could a wild animal or dog have bit his arm? But that really does not hold up for a variety of reasons. Let me know in the comments below if you have thought of an alternate scenario that could have transpired. This next section is titled Lies. Most viewers will probably want to skip over this section, so feel free to. But I tried to keep track of various lies that seem to have been told during this case and trial. I'm sure I missed a lot, so feel free to write in the comments below anything that I missed. Number 1, party attendee Julie Nagel could not remember being inside Jen McCabe's home, but then admitted she pet sat their dog. Brian Higgins, Jen McCabe, and Matt McCabe testified that Higgins parked his Jeep at the Alberts mailbox, but Julie Nagel and 3 people in the pickup truck said there was not a car parked on the street near the mailbox. On this topic, I don't even know what to think. It seems odd to me that several people say it was and several people say it was not. However, I don't know how it benefits Brian, Jen, and Matt to lie about where Higgins parked, but I'm sure some people online do. Jen made 7 phone calls to John between 12:29 to 12:50 a.m. that she does not remember making. She only remembers speaking to John as she gave him directions as they drove to Fairview. Caitlin Albert remembered Jen speaking on the phone in the kitchen during the party, so that was after 12:18. Jen said the butt dials were because John was the last number that she had called. However, the 7 phone calls are odd because they showed as missed on John's call log, but there were no voicemails left by Jen. So how did each of those 7 phone calls end if her phone was in her back pocket and she did not push cancel before his voicemail initiated? Brian Higgins said he was never on the 2nd floor of the Alberts house, but Brian Albert testified they may have gone upstairs to look at photos of his son in the Marines. Nicole Albert, Brian Albert, and Higgins all testified about looking at the photos, but people other than Brian Albert all described the 2 men looking at the photos in the family room, not upstairs. Karen told police she did not leave C.F. McCarthy's bar with a drinking glass, but it's on video, and people at the Waterfall bar testified they saw her take it out of her jacket when she arrived at Waterfall. Higgins said he did not make any phone calls after leaving the Alberts party, but Canton Police Department video shows him holding a phone near his mouth. The phone display looked white, and iPhones have a black screen when on the phone with someone, so I'm not convinced he was talking to someone around 1:30 a.m., or possibly listening to a video or a podcast. He did not have to turn over all of his phone records, so it's unknown. At 2:22 a.m., Brian Albert dialed Higgins. Phone records showed it only lasted 1 second, and Albert said it must have been a mistake, which aligns with it only lasting 1 second. But Higgins called him back 17 seconds later, and the duration was 22 seconds. Both men said they do not remember placing or receiving the phone calls, and said they were mistakes, likely because they were in recent contacts because they communicated earlier in that day and night. Also, Albert said he was intimate in bed with his wife at that time. Next subject. Jen let police extract her phone data on February 2nd. During the trial, defense attorney Alan Jackson asked, "Did you know at the time Allie, Jen's daughter, had driven Colin home, or she said she drove him home?" Jen replied, "I had no idea she drove him home." Which makes me wonder, how could Jen not know this? I can understand Jen not knowing that at 12:10 a.m. while she was leaving the Waterfall, but maybe she misunderstood the question, asking if she knew on February 2nd. It just seems unlikely that she and Allie would not have discussed it in the several days after John's death. In a TV interview, Karen did an impression of John's mother, saying that Mrs. O'Keefe leaned over the kitchen island when Karen and her dad returned to John's house, and Mrs. O'Keefe said to Karen,
"His mother leans over the kitchen island and says to me, 'I think he looks like he got hit by a car. He looks like he got hit by a car.'"
During trial 2, Mrs. O'Keefe was asked, "Did you ever lean over a kitchen island and say, 'I think he looks like he got hit by a car'?" Mrs. O'Keefe replied, "No, I don't remember talking to her that morning." There have been various accounts by people of Karen's interactions after returning from the hospital, so it may be a matter of one of them lying or Mrs. O'Keefe being traumatized and not remembering. The snowplow driver said he saw a Ford Edge by the Alberts flagpole around 3:30 a.m. The Alberts denied their Ford Edge was parked on the street overnight because they had plenty of room in their driveway. The prosecution said the plow driver changed his story several times and was not reliable. During trial 2, Jen recalled being approached by federal agents at her home and told them she needed 10 minutes before talking. Later, she told them that during that 10 minutes, she called her husband and Carrie and no one else. After they left, Jen talked to her husband and said during the 10 minutes, she also called John's mother, Brian Albert, and her witness advocate. So she immediately called the agents and revealed the 3 additional calls. Karen Reed's defense team accused Proctor of lying about the time that Karen's SUV left her parents' house at 5:30 p.m., but it was actually 4:16 p.m. The SUV arrived on the tow truck at Canton Police Department soon after 5:30 p.m. Proctor explained that he mistakenly wrote the incorrect time and kept copying and pasting the incorrect time in future reports. Buchanan testified that police did not know the correct time until the defense gave them home security footage from Karen's parents' home showing the tow truck leaving with Karen's SUV. I think it was also mentioned that the defense team shared that video with a TV station, but not with police or the prosecution. Next, Proctor told the grand jury that no snowplow traveled on Fairview Road on January 29th. To explain this, Proctor said his interview with town employee Michael Trotta indicated that the plows focused on the main roads, despite Trotta testifying that he told Proctor that Brian Loughran plowed Fairview. After calling 911, Jen made 2 phone calls to her sister Nicole, who lives at 34 Fairview, at 6:07 and 6:08 a.m., lasting 7 and 9 seconds. Phone logs show both calls were answered, but Jen and Nicole testified that Nicole did not answer. If Jen did talk to Nicole at 6:07 a.m., why would she need to call her back at 6:08? How much can 2 people say in 7 and 9 seconds? I'm sure in the comments below, I'm going to find out. My research showed the Celebrate forensic software cannot know if the recipient picked up the phone if police did not extract data from the recipient's phone, which they did not do for Nicole. After that time, Jen called Brian Albert at 6:23 a.m., but he did not answer. Why would she have to call him if she already talked to Nicole, who was sleeping right next to him, and Nicole answered both times? I'm not sure what to think about this. Carrie told the grand jury she heard Karen ask Jen to search about hypothermia, but admitted during the trial that was not true. Carrie explained that she misunderstood the question, and she knew about the search because John's mother asked Carrie and Jen to create a timeline of what happened from the time Karen woke them up calling saying that John was dead and missing. Finally, I previously uploaded an entire video titled Karen Reed Lie Detector Test, reviewing some of her lies. This next section, I titled it Police Corruption and Police Incompetence. As I looked into this case, I tried to write down when I would come across an instance of either corruption or incompetence. The defense argued that the Canton Library provided surveillance video, but it is missing between 12:37 to 12:39 a.m. when the defense said Karen's SUV was driving by on her way from the Alberts to John's house. But police testified Karen connected to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36 a.m. So that accusation doesn't seem to hold up, although it does seem curious. A huge mystery in this case is that there are 3 missing ring videos from John's garage camera. Karen returning to John's around 12:36 a.m., Karen showing Jen and Carrie her damaged taillight and picking pieces out and dropping them, and finally Karen's father driving her SUV away from John's with Karen inside. Trooper Guarino testified that he checked John's computers, and it does not appear that Karen logged into John's Ring account, and she wouldn't have had access after her final time at John's. The police, including Trooper Proctor, had access to the Ring app on John's phone, but it benefits Karen more than the police to delete those videos. Police said they made 2 requests to Ring, but they said once a video is deleted, there is no digital footprint. It is gone forever. Trooper DeChico was tasked by Proctor with reviewing all 330 ring videos from John's house. He wrote down his observations on sticky pads, one of which read 0041, taillights from driveway, I think she arrived home. The 0041 signifies 12:41 a.m. So if DeChico saw that video, why is that video missing? Proctor testified DeChico reviewed a lot of videos, and his note about 12:41 did not have a corresponding date. Although it seems to me kind of odd how many times would Karen pull in at 12:41 a.m. Proctor testified he stopped reading a text exchange on Karen's phone when he realized it was with an attorney, but Karen said she did not have David Unetti's cell phone number until after Proctor took her phone. Proctor knew some members of the Albert family and should have never been assigned to this case. People accused Proctor of planting glass on Karen's bumper that did not match John's glass from the Waterfall Bar, but did match a piece that Proctor said he found in the road. Not all of John's broken drinking glass was recovered, and some of the glass shards were so small they couldn't be attempted to fit with the other glass pieces, so it was not proven that Proctor planted glass. His text messages showed that he thought there was enough evidence to convict Karen the day that John's body was found, which obviously she was never convicted. Officers from the Canton Police Department interviewed the McCabe's and Alberts together for about 10 minutes soon after John was found, without recording it or searching the Alberts' house. Lieutenant Gallagher testified that they only interviewed Jen McCabe and did not separate her from the Alberts. The officers said they had no reason to believe that John had ever been inside the house, so they did not have probable cause to search it. Regarding Karen's taillight damage, there were claims of tampering and smashing and then putting pieces at the Alberts' house to be found by police. However, 3 security videos showed that Karen's damaged taillight was similar to the Canton Police Department photos even before police had access to her SUV, and Dr. Welcher proved that no damage occurred when Karen's SUV touched John's car at 1 mile per hour, and Karen has no other explanation for her various SUV damage. If police were planting taillight evidence, it makes no sense for them to find taillight pieces on several different days over several weeks. Why would they not just put all the taillight pieces on January 29th at night? Proctor and Buchanan submitted their DNA, and it was not found on evidence. Brian Albert upgraded his phone the day before the defense requested that witnesses preserve their phones, and on a conference call when the prosecution told him to save his phone, he did not tell them that he just turned it in for another one. Brian Higgins had a work phone and a personal phone, and he threw out his personal phone, but it was after the judge denied the defense's request. Canton Police Department Sallyport garage video was inverted, but the timestamp was not. The police and prosecution did not tell the defense and the jury that. In those videos, there is missing time, but police said it was a motion-activated camera. However, the video starts with people already in view. Also, some of the video was extremely low quality, like my YouTube videos. Officer Clark took 2 photos of the hair on the back of Karen's SUV at Canton Police Department on February 1st, but it appears the hair is in 2 different positions. I looked back at this video of Clark taking the photos, and it appears that he pulled back the police tape and then let it go. But I'm not sure that would cause enough force to move the hair, or why police would move the hair and then take another photo. The photos do not have any timestamps on the published images to indicate if they were seconds or minutes apart, but it was captured on security video. Proctor's text messages about Karen were vulgar, but they indicated that he thought Karen was guilty, not that he knew she was innocent and he plotted to frame her. Finally, the supervisor of some of the troopers who testified at Trial 1 was the supervisor of the jury. In this section, I'm going to reveal police incompetence. In regards to John's clothing, it was on the floor of the ambulance, the floor of the hospital, Buchanan's truck, and then Buchanan and Proctor put it on top of butcher paper in the temporary evidence room for 6 days until it was booked into evidence by Trooper DeChico. Proctor did not drop it off at the State Police Crime Lab until March 14th. Buchanan viewed video from the neighbor at 36 Fairview Road, but did not save it as evidence. After Karen's trial, Proctor was suspended without pay and then fired for his inappropriate text messages, sharing case information with friends and family, and driving his police car after drinking alcohol. Proctor's supervisor Buchanan lost 5 vacation days for not disciplining Proctor. Canton Police Department officer Kevin Albert, Brian's brother, was suspended for 3 days for drinking on duty. Police collected blood evidence using borrowed Solo cups from a neighbor and stored them in a grocery bag in a refrigerator. The bag was later photographed a few feet from the back of Karen's SUV, not properly sealed or labeled. State Police forensic scientist Hartnett only collected 2 swabs from one of the 6 cups, and it was never tested later to confirm if it was blood or whose blood it was. Canton Police Lieutenant Gallagher does not remember if he asked another officer, Kelleher, for his home surveillance video across from 34 Fairview Road, but said he knew it would not show the street because he has picked up packages in the past for Kelleher, and it only captures the door and portion of Kelleher's front lawn. Buchanan put evidence in bags, but somebody else labeled them. During the trial, Buchanan could not identify the other officer's signature on the evidence bag. Proctor and Buchanan did not take photos of Karen's SUV at her parents before it was put on the tow truck. Police did not secure the crime scene with a tent or tape because the blizzard conditions included high wind, but they left the scene unattended for many hours, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., between finding John's body and the CERT team coming, and then police would sometimes conduct further searches as the snow melted, as opposed to completing the search soon after John's death. A police report from a Canton police sergeant listed 32 Fairview Road on the top sheet, but had 34 Fairview Road written in the narrative. Canton Police Department's dispatch log incorrectly listed 3 Canton police officers as arriving within seconds of each other in the wrong order and an incorrect address on Fairview Road, and also Officer Sarif gave a wrong address to a state grand jury. Paramedic Flamati's reports never show that Karen said she hit John, but he said he told Proctor and the grand jury. Canton Police Lieutenant Gallagher never wrote a report, but he said other officers did. That's the way to do it. Have other people do your stuff. Proctor found taillight pieces as large as 7 inches on February 18th. Why did it take so long to see them? The State Police Crime Lab did not test John's clothing until May 2023 for biological testing. The State Police CERT team did not know the identities of 3 people in civilian clothes helping search for evidence on January 29th. Officer Tully's report said 3 taillight pieces were found on January 29th. During Trial 1 testimony, Tully opened the evidence bags and there were 5 pieces. Buchanan decided not to have crime scene photographers come to the scene to document where they found additional pieces after January 29th or calculate the location coordinates. Police used a snowblower to reveal the area where John's body had been found. In my opinion, after all this snow from this big blizzard, I'm not exactly sure what the best process would have been to search for evidence. John had socks on at the hospital, but they were never mentioned in evidence. Proctor wrote the time of Karen's SUV seizure incorrectly in his first report, but kept copying and pasting it on future reports. He said he made a mistake by writing the drop-off time as the pickup time. Sloppy evidence collection. They did not photograph all items and their GPS location. Some police reports were not recorded until hundreds of days after John died. Screenshots of text messages between Colin Albert and Allie McCabe were allowed as evidence as opposed to phone extraction data, which was never done on both of their phones. Police need probable cause to seize phones, and there was not enough for Colin and Allie. Finally, this last section is astonishing to me. Proctor and police did not interview some of these witnesses until a very long time after John died. Colin Albert, 1.5 years, and it was not even recorded. Julie Nagel, 8 months. Tristan Morris, Caitlin Albert's boyfriend, May 7th, 2024, a week before his testimony. Caitlin Albert, 1.5 years. Sarah Levinson, 9 months. Brian Albert Jr., 18 months. Ricky D'Antano, 21 months. Heather Maxson, 19 months. And finally, Canton Police Officer Gallagher, who used a snowblower at the crime scene, was never interviewed by Proctor. In 2023, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Massachusetts convened a federal grand jury to look into possible misconduct or cover-ups related to the state and local investigation of John's death. The Department of Justice and FBI examined whether evidence was overlooked, mismanaged, or planted by police, and if there was bias or corruption with personal relationships influencing the investigation. Key witnesses testified before a federal grand jury. Accident reconstruction experts from the firm ARCA were hired by federal investigators and testified John's injuries were inconsistent with being struck by a car. Those 2 experts were later hired by the defense and conducted further testing and reached the same conclusion. On February 19, 2025, the U.S. Attorney's Office said the federal investigation was over and no charges were filed. For the true crime cases that I've looked into, As I go along researching information, I create a spreadsheet with reasons for and against the person being involved in the crime. So this spreadsheet is reasons for and against Karen causing the death of John O'Keefe. So for each row, on the left side, I have the reasons for, and then in the column on the right, I try to think of other reasons against those facts. This spreadsheet has 102 rows. I told you this is a deep dive. Here we go. There was a lot of tension in Karen and John's relationship, including most of the day, January 28th, before meeting at the first bar. John texted, quote, "Sick of always arguing and fighting. It's been weekly for several months now," end quote. Karen texted frustration that John did not seem to be into the relationship anymore. At 12:37 a.m., Karen left John a voicemail screaming, "John, I fucking hate you!" 5 minutes after John's phone registered the last steps of his life. It was her 8th phone call to John since she first called him at 12:33 and 35 seconds a.m., which was 1 minute and 19 seconds after John's phone last moved on the Alberts lawn. Karina Kolokithis described them as lovey-dovey at the Waterfall Bar. Why did it take John 7 minutes to exit Karen's SUV? What happened inside Karen's SUV that would make her say she hated him? Against this, they appeared happy at the 2 bars and were planning vacations. People may say Karen's story about John going inside the Alberts home and not updating her caused her to be angry, but that story has proven to be a lie. John used the Waze navigation app to find the Alberts house, but also spoke to Jen twice, who told them it was near the house of a woman John previously hooked up with before dating Karen. Despite the app and directions, Karen missed the left turn onto Fairview. Were they busy arguing? After that, Karen made a 3-point turn in a driveway. At the intersection, a pickup truck flashed its lights for Karen to pull onto Fairview Road, and the truck followed Karen's SUV to the Alberts house because it contained Ryan Nagel, who was picking up his sister Julie from Brian Albert Jr.'s birthday party. At 12:24 and 38 seconds a.m., Karen and John parked in front of the Alberts house. Between 12:31:56 and 12:32:16, John took 36 steps over about 82 feet and never moved again near the flagpole. At 12:32:09, John locked his phone after reading the text from Jen that said, "Pull behind me." The defense argued that between 12:21:10 and 12:24:22, John's phone showed it moved 87 meters, 80 steps, and 3 flights climbed, and that shows John went in the Alberts home and basement where he was attacked. However, the 3 witnesses outside were proven to have texted at 12:23 a.m. that they were arriving soon, and they never saw John get out of the SUV. Experts also noted that testing proved the movement on John's phone was consistent with John using his phone while Karen drove through Canton and the elevation changed 3 meters up or down. However, if that data was wrong, how reliable is the other data and timestamps for John's movements? Several people drove by the Alberts house after 12:32 a.m. and did not see a body other than Julie Nagel possibly seeing a blob near the flagpole before 2 a.m. At 12:31 and 38 seconds a.m., there was a trigger event on Karen's SUV, but the SUV time was not perfectly aligned with the real-world time, so an expert determined the SUV clock was 21 to 29 seconds faster than John's phone, which is more accurate. Between 12:32:04 and 12:32:12, it was the 8-second window based on the time adjustment that Karen's SUV recorded data 5 seconds before and 5 seconds after a trigger event, which in this case was when Karen's SUV's gas pedal throttle hit 30% going in reverse. Karen's SUV went forward 34 feet from the start of the event when it was going 13.67 miles per hour at 5 seconds before the trigger of 30% throttle. Karen put her SUV in neutral, then went in reverse 87 feet during the 10 seconds of data. Her SUV went from 24.2 miles per hour to 23.6 miles per hour half a second later as her steering wheel jostled slightly, which was consistent with a pedestrian strike. At 12:32 and 9 seconds, John locked his phone. At the latest, 12:32:12, Karen's gas pedal hit 30% throttle in reverse 1, 2, or 3 seconds after John pushed the lock button on his cell phone at 12:32:09. Why did Karen floor it in reverse soon after John exited? Against this, the decrease in speed could have been from tires slipping on snow or the curb. People can argue that the SUV time should not have been adjusted, but John had not taken any steps at 12:31:38, so he would have been in the SUV when Karen floored it in reverse. and then he would have gotten out, walked for 20 seconds, and died near the flagpole, which makes no sense how he would have lost his shoe, hat, and gotten the right arm wounds and skull injury, etc. Next up, John sat in Karen's SUV for 7 minutes after parking. Then, in 20 seconds, John started walking, Karen floored it in reverse, and John's phone never moved again from the flagpole area. In combination with this data and John's phone location never in the Alberts home, I cannot think of any other scenario that makes sense. Against this, experts stated that John's injuries are not associated with a car accident. However, all other theories lack solid evidence. At 12:36 and 39 seconds a.m., Karen connected to John's home Wi-Fi. A YouTube video showed the time from the Alberts to John's could be driven in 3 minutes and 40 seconds, meaning Karen would have to leave the Alberts by 12:32 and 59 seconds a.m., which aligns with the timeline. Against this, other YouTube videos showed the drive took longer, but those were in the daytime, more cars on the road, and red traffic lights. 3 people in a truck arrived immediately behind Karen and parked at the driveway between 4 to 7 minutes and never saw anyone get out of Karen's SUV. As they left, they saw Karen's SUV interior light on, but did not see John, which indicates he opened the door to get out when he saw the truck started to pull away from the driveway. Karen lied about parking at the driveway and seeing John walk inside the house. Karen's changing story of what happened. At 5 a.m., she told Kerry that John was dead and later said she thought John was hit by a plow. In the afternoon, she told police she had stomach issues and dropped John off, but did not see him go in the Alberts house. In a TV interview on the ID network, Karen said she wasn't sure if they were at the right house and had John check it out. John took her full vodka soda glass, walked up the driveway, and opened the side door and went to walk in. Karen waited a minute and John did not return. It only took 2 to 3 minutes for Karen to be irritated, so she called John, and he did not answer. Karen said, quote, "You gotta be effing kidding me. What are you doing? You just went in. I'm sitting here. Either we're welcome or we're not, but it shouldn't take you 5 minutes to determine that. And then about 10 minutes went by and I left, and I was not happy. Little did I know, John was not getting my phone calls." End quote. Little did Karen know her data and eyewitnesses prove she's a liar. However, 3 people in the truck said no one got out of the SUV. Karen and John had been parked for 7 minutes and 18 seconds before John took steps out of her SUV. 2 minutes later, Karen called John while driving. 8 minutes and 57 seconds after they arrived at the Alberts house, and not while she waited outside. She did not call him between 12:24 and 12:33 because she knew where he was, possibly too busy arguing with her in her SUV to respond to text messages from Brian and Jen. Why would Karen think John possibly walked into the wrong home, and when he didn't return, her solution was to drive away after midnight while it was snowing without calling him or walking to the door? It makes no sense. If Karen was parked at the driveway, why wouldn't she have asked Julie Nagel when she came out to talk to her brother, "Hey, have you seen my boyfriend inside? Is this the Alberts house?" Never happened because Karen's a liar. In another TV interview with 2020, here's what Karen said. Karen told John to check inside the Alberts home about the party and let her know, quote, "and I'll follow you behind." I said, "Can we make sure we're welcome here? Nobody extended the invite to me. I didn't hear the invite extended to you." So I pull at the foot of the driveway, so I drop him off. He goes up the driveway and approaches the side door. And as I see him approach the door, I look down at my phone. I hadn't been on my phone the entire night. I queue up a song to play on my Bluetooth, and I just start browsing through, missed text messages and a couple of emails, and I probably waited about a full minute, and I look back at the door. I would have expected him to be either walking back to me or calling me that, "Yeah, we're here." The reporter then did a voiceover saying, Reed says after about 10 minutes of waiting in her car, she became irritated that O'Keefe still hadn't gotten in touch with her, and she drove back to his home where she continued calling him before she fell asleep around 1:30 in the morning. However, a few hours after John died, Karen told police she had stomach issues and no intention of going inside the party. Why did her story change? The pickup truck arrived at the same time and they parked at the driveway, not Karen, and no one exited her SUV. Jen did extend the invite to Karen and even gave them directions twice on the phone while Karen drove to the Alberts house. There is waterfall video of Karen and John outside talking to Jen. In a police report shown on the Nightline TV show, it said, quote, "When she and the victim were leaving the waterfall, she stated they were invited to a house on Fairview Road," end quote. So years later in TV interviews, why was she unsure if they were invited? This isn't even a matter of Karen being drunk and forgetting. This story is a proven lie. In the column against this, guest Julie Nagel told police she looked outside for her brother and saw an SUV stopped near the mailbox, but then it moved up between the mailbox and the flagpole, then further up near the flagpole. Nobody got out of the SUV, but this goes against phone expert Ian Whiffen, stating that John's phone data showed he was traveling at 15 to 17 miles per hour when passing the Alberts driveway and did not come to a stop until further up. In another part of Karen's interview with ID, she described approaching 34 Fairview Road with Kerry and Jen around 6 a.m. Quote, "I was looking to find him on the side of the road. I was expecting I'd find him," end quote. This is illogical to expect John would be dead on the side of the road after seeing John walk through the Alberts front door, or if John got out of Karen's SUV near the mailbox, or if John got out of Karen's SUV near the flagpole to walk inside the party and Karen drove home because she had stomach issues. Many of Karen's statements do not align with phone and car data, witness testimony, and common sense. It comes across as trying to look not guilty, but failing miserably. Karen's Vanity Fair interview also included the following. Karen wondered whether they were at the right address. There weren't many cars in the driveway, and Reed felt uneasy. McCabe had conveyed the invitation, so Reed wasn't sure how welcome the couple actually were. O'Keefe said he'd check out the scene and report back, but minutes passed without word. Quote, "I got pissed," end quote. She knew that a woman O'Keefe used to hook up with lived a few houses down the street. He's got to be screwing around. I didn't think he was physically incapacitated, end quote. After about 10 minutes of waiting, Reed drove to O'Keefe's house. To Reed, it felt like Aruba all over again. She sent O'Keefe a barrage of angry voicemails and texts. Aruba is when Karen mistakenly thought that John kissed another woman. Against this, it is so unreasonable that Karen would think that after Jen invited them to her sister's house, and John was just on the phone with Jen twice after they all hung out, and John used the Waze directions app, and there were probably at least 5 cars in the driveway, that John would have Karen drop him off so he could sneak down the street to hook up with another woman. Like he would just leave Karen sitting there while he hooked up, and then how would he get a ride home? John didn't even get out of Karen's car for 7 minutes, so why did it take so long to have a conversation about whether they were at the right house or welcome? John read the text message from Jen at 12:27 asking, "Here?" but did not respond or get out for 4 more minutes. Karen's stories defy common sense. In this story, Karen wasn't sure they were at the right house, so John was going to check it out and report back. Data and eyewitnesses proved this was another lie. But let's pretend like Karen isn't a liar or a forgetful, convicted drunk driver. If John went to check out inside and Karen saw him walk through the door like she stated, her voicemails should have been asking, "John, why didn't you call or text me once you got inside? Why didn't you come back to the car to let me know it was okay to come inside? Why didn't you answer my call when I was parked outside? Since my stomach hurts and the storm is coming, I'm going to sleep at my house." Karen did not call John while she was parked at the Alberts. She was driving to his house. Also from the Vanity Fair interview, quote from Karen, "I believe whatever happened to John was a setup to teach him a lesson or tune him up, and it got out of control. No one would choose to kill someone in their own home and then set it up so sloppily," end quote. Reed was still so confounded by O'Keefe's death that she was open to the idea that she could have accidentally hit him. Quote, "I told my parents, if I did anything in any way, I'll pay my dues," end quote. She says now, quote, "That's how this should work. I want to know the truth. Good, bad, ugly," end quote. Well, then why do your statements not match the truth? Against this, what lesson would anyone inside the Alberts house plan to teach John when there were people there celebrating a birthday? These people just happily hung out with John a week earlier at a bar and an hour earlier at another bar. If Karen saw John walk through the Alberts door like she said, how would she be open to hitting him with her car? Karen had a call with John's sister-in-law Erin after he died. It was early in the afternoon on January 29th, and Karen said she dropped John off at the Alberts house because she didn't feel like going. If everything was fine between Karen and John, why didn't she either go inside with him or drop him off and go home? She was parked outside the Alberts house for 7 to 8 minutes. Karen's angry voicemails to John, her statement to paramedics that their last interaction was an argument, and her SUV being throttled up to 74% while in reverse shows Karen was angry when she was at the Alberts. John's niece told police she heard Karen tell Jen on the phone that she got in an argument with John and dropped him off. John's phone location data showed he never went in the Alberts house. 9 people inside said John never entered the house, and 3 people outside said he never exited Karen's SUV. So how does John get beat up and bitten by a dog when he never went inside the home? Against this, people argue John's location data radius included parts of the Alberts house. But that was only when the signal and accuracy was bad. As the signal improved seconds later, it showed John's phone was only outside and never in the house, garage, or backyard. Approaching Fairview, his location was always accurate on the street, but his center point was never in the Alberts home. The rear right side of Karen's SUV had various damage all in the area where John would have been walking towards the Alberts driveway after he got out of Karen's SUV after 7 minutes ignoring texts from people asking if they were coming inside. Party attendee Julie Nagel thought she saw a 5 to 6 foot black blob near the Alberts flagpole when they left the party around 1:45 to 2 a.m. Against this, Julie had been drinking alcohol and did not report that to police immediately. There were 5 shards of glass on Karen's bumper, some in the street, and a broken drinking glass near John's body that was similar to a glass he took from the Waterfall bar. State Police scientist Christina Hanley testified the broken glass did not match 2 shards of glass found on Karen's bumper. She was unable to test the other 3 pieces due to their size and condition. Karen said she removed a piece of glass from John's nose when she found him. So how did it lodge in his nose? What circumstance of Karen hitting John or John getting attacked in the house would cause glass to stick in his nose? Against this, one of the 5 pieces of glass found on her bumper was consistent with a shard ex-trooper Michael Proctor recovered, but was not a match for a broken cup or the other pieces of glass recovered at the scene. Karen's taillight had noticeable damage on video at 5:07 a.m., 8:22 a.m., and 4:12 p.m. before police had a chance to tamper with it. Against this, Dayton officer Nicholas Barros testified the damage he saw at 4:12 was not as bad as the February 1st, 2022 photo from the Canton Police Department garage. But at trial number 2, he gave different answers and admitted it did look similar to the 5:07 and 8:22 a.m. videos, and said Proctor and Buchanan did not touch Karen's SUV at 4 p.m. at her parents' house when it was towed. There were over 40 taillight pieces found near John's body and on the street. Against this, how did John's body crack the light, but his injuries did not include bruises or fractures that are normally associated with that type of impact? No taillight evidence was found at the scene until 5:45 p.m., and Karen's SUV was delivered to the Canton Police Department around 5:31 p.m. Some people argue her taillight was broken at the police department, and then a police officer drove to the Alberts house and planted evidence. Many more pieces of taillight were found at separate times by various officers over the next few weeks. I think her taillight damage on video shows that it was really damaged before police even had a chance to tamper with it, and if they were going to plant taillight evidence, why not do it all on January 29th instead of all the way up to February 18th? John's DNA was found on Karen's taillight, but Proctor and Buchanan's DNA was not, which contradicts accusations of tampering. Why not just plant all the pieces the first night if police were framing Karen? Against this, Nicholas Bradford from the company Bodie Technology said, quote, "It is at least 740 non-million times more likely to be observed if it originated from John O'Keefe and 2 unknown, unrelated individuals than from 3 unknown, unrelated individuals," end quote, he said, noting that non-million is a number with 30 zeros. Maureen Hartnett is a state police scientist, and she said there was no blood on the car. John dated Karen for 2 years. He could have touched her taillight previously, but against this, how often do people touch the taillight of their car or somebody else's? Microscopic red and clear plastic fragments were found in the combined debris of John's sweatshirt and t-shirt that was consistent with material from Karen's taillight. Against that, the debris was collected weeks after John's death and passed through Proctor before the State Police Crime Lab with no documented chain of custody until March 14th, 2022. The State Police forensic scientist said it was a possibility the plastic was from a taillight, not for certain. There were scuff marks that could have been from John's jeans. However, this was not proven to be caused by John. There was a dent with missing paint under Karen's back window that was possibly due to John's drinking glass in his outstretched hand and arm. Karen admitted that she removed a piece of glass stuck in John's nose when she found him. Against that, no human tissue or blood was found on the SUV. John's hand did not have any fractures from holding the glass that could have been hit by Karen's SUV. How would John's glass get hit at 23 miles per hour and shatter down and stay on the bumper? Karen admitted John left her car with a glass from the bar. There was a mark on the back of Karen's SUV that could have been from that glass. It makes no sense for John to have gone inside, got attacked and the glass broken inside, and the attackers picked up the pieces and brought them outside and put them on the lawn and street as opposed to throwing the glass in the garbage. A piece of hair was found on the rear of Karen's SUV, and an expert stated with 95% confidence that at least 99.895% of the population can be excluded as being a source of the hair sample, but John and his maternal relatives could not. Against that, Karen and John spent a lot of time together, so it could have been transferred another time or been from his mother, niece, or nephew. 2 photos of the hair from different angles in the Canton Police Department garage appeared to show different lengths and direction that the defense team suggested was tampering. The 8:22 a.m. police dash cam video shows Karen's SUV the first time a police officer was near it, and there was a large amount of red plastic missing from her taillight. There was no evidence that Proctor or any other officer planted taillight pieces at Fairview. State police scientists reassembled the various pieces and mostly recreated what was missing from Karen's taillight. Any accusation of police planting 47 pieces of taillight over several weeks does not make sense. Karen told several people she damaged her taillight, including Jen at 5:05 a.m., before Karen backed into John's car. How and where did Karen damage her taillight if it was not by hitting John? Where are those pieces? Karen admitted showing Kerry and Jen her taillight before they found John, and Karen picked pieces out in John's driveway. Against this, there is missing video from when Karen's SUV entered the Canton Police Department garage and Proctor was there. However, the 3 videos before that showed a large amount of taillight was missing, and Proctor didn't need to tamper with it. John's right sneaker came off, which is known to happen in vehicle strikes. It was found at the curb. His hat was also found under the snow. Against that, this does not prove he was hit by Karen. John's injuries were mostly on the right side of his body. He had many abrasions on the top of his right arm, a right knee abrasion, small laceration on his right upper eyelid. John's jeans had a large stain on the left back pocket, as if he was hit from the right and landed on his left side. He also had marks on his right hand, possibly from paramedics. Dr. Scorti-Bello said John died from blunt impact injuries to his head and hypothermia, but his injuries were not consistent with a fist fight, and the right arm marks were on top of the arm, but not below. Dr. La Posada for the defense said John died from blunt force injuries to his head with a raised or rough object that he fell on, not a flat surface, and not hypothermia. In the against column, Karen's SUV's data did not indicate a collision. However, experts testified that the car computer usually only registers collisions with other vehicles due to their weight and force. John had a 0.5 centimeter abrasion on his right knee, which would not be consistent with a car accident. He had a small laceration on the left side of his nose and a faint scratch on the back of his left hand. His head wound was near center. Dr. Russell testified that a dog's upper teeth only make contact with the skin during some dog attacks, which could explain John not having any marks on the lower side of his right arm. Dr. Welcher is a 1/2 inch shorter than John, and his testing showed the paint transfer lined up nearly identical to John's right arm injuries. But I'm supposed to believe that John got bitten by a dog in the same area, but not on the bottom of his arm, and there was no dog saliva, hair, or DNA on John's sweatshirt, and defense expert Dr. Russell confirmed the marks on John's arm did not match the pattern of teeth of the Alberts dog. There was no record of the Alberts dog going after a human when there was not another dog present, plus data proved Karen's SUV was going in reverse within seconds of the time John locked his phone, and soon after he never moved again, but his phone never went to the house where the dog was. Against this, defense expert Dr. Rentschler said that Dr. Welcher's testing was not comprehensive, and several experts testified John's injuries were not consistent with a car accident, but could be dog bites on John's arm, and sometimes dog bites don't make a mark from their lower teeth. The pig DNA found on John's sweatshirt could be from a dog eating a pig ear as a dog treat, but it seems odd that only pig DNA would transfer after a vicious dog attack, and not the dog's DNA, hair, or saliva. According to her father, in the hospital, Karen told him, quote,
During your first discussions with Karen, did she believe she may have hit John?
No. She felt she struck something. She said, Dad, I think I struck something. I said, what do you mean? Right? This was in the hospital. Right? She says, I remember, all right, backing up and hitting something.
The Reed family seems to have a habit of repeating things 3 times. All right. Who does he think he is, Matthew McConaughey? So if Karen remembered backing up and hitting something, when was that? Before her time in the hospital, her SUV went in reverse for 3 times. The 3-point turn on Cedar Crest, then at 24 miles per hour in front of the Alberts house soon after John exited her SUV, and at 5:07 a.m. into John's SUV in his driveway at 1 mile per hour. After that, Karen pulled into the McCabe's driveway, but Jen McCabe ended up driving her car back to John's house. Against this, people may argue this referred to Karen backing into John's car at 5:07 a.m., but she knew that was a different time and location where the only thing she could have hit was John's car, not an unknown something, and there was nothing to hit when she made the 3-point turn on Cedar Crest after mistakenly passing Fairview. So how did Karen get this various damage if she did not hit John? At 12:33 and 35 seconds a.m., Karen called John, but did not leave a voicemail until her 8th call at 12:37. What was so urgent that Karen had to speak to John again 2 minutes after leaving him at the Alberts house? If Karen went in reverse at a high rate of speed, she would have passed John after he fell to the ground, and her constant calling was likely because she wanted to find out if he had gotten off the ground after she left. It could have been that she was worried she was going to be in trouble for angrily going in reverse at a high speed, and probably worried that she unintentionally hurt him. When John didn't pick up the phone to confirm that he was okay, she left a voicemail that she effing hated him and created other reasons why he wouldn't answer the phone that weren't a result of her actions. As Karen reversed after John exited her SUV, police testing proved that her car would beep if there was an obstruction close to her car and also show a warning on her dashboard display. It seems unlikely Karen would not remember this, but she has never explained the contradiction to her claim that she dropped John at the driveway, how her SUV got multiple damages, or why she floored it in reverse. Against this, people say the SUV data was interpreted wrong, and the 24 miles per hour in reverse was when the tow truck driver went in reverse at Karen's parents' house and the tires slipped on the snow, but the home security video doesn't prove that. The data for that trigger event shows her car was traveling 13 miles per hour forward before it went in reverse. The tow truck driver did not drive 13 miles per hour forward in Karen's parents' driveway. Karen told John's niece, Jen, and Kerry that she or a snowplow could have hit John and he could be dead before they even found his body. Why would Karen think that worst possibility if she also said that she last saw John at Waterfall and told a reporter that she saw John walk into the Alberts house? Jen McCabe and 3 paramedics, Tim Nuttall, Katie McLaughlin, and Anthony Flamati, heard Karen repeatedly say, I hit him, after they asked how John suffered his injuries, as well as Kerry Roberts, John's niece, and paramedic Jason Becker, all testifying that Karen repeatedly asked, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? In Karen's 5 a.m. phone call to Kerry, the first thing she said was, Kerry, John's dead, and then she hung up. Officer Sarif was first on scene. He testified that Karen kept saying, this is all my fault, this is my fault, I did this. If Karen's last memory of John was him walking into the Alberts house, why would she tell at least 8 people that she was the one responsible for John lying dead on the lawn? Shouldn't she have been screaming, who did this to him in that house, instead of saying she did it to him with her car? In a TV interview, Karen admitted she said, I hit him.
Did I hit him? I know I said I hit him, but did I really say it as many times as law enforcement is claiming I said it?
In Karen's second call to Kerry, she said John had not returned home after going out drinking the night before. Kerry testified that Karen said, I think something happened to John. I think he got hit by a plow. He didn't come home last night. We drank so much, I don't remember anything from last night. But then later in TV interviews, Karen acts like she didn't drink that much. Why would she assume he was killed by a plow if she left him at Waterfall Bar or dropped him off outside the Alberts? Karen and her defense attorneys tried to make it appear that Karen did not drink that much, so if she wasn't drunk, why can't she remember everything? Against this, testing showed Karen was legally drunk at 9 a.m., so she may not remember everything. However, she did remember Jen referencing John's ex-girlfriend as they approached Fairview. We're supposed to believe she has false memories of John walking in the Alberts door, but not remember fighting with John and hearing her car warning system beep as she floored it in reverse, and almost certainly would have seen John on the ground as she pulled away. The waterfall video at 12:11 a.m. shows cars with snow on the side window. Karen's SUV was on video at 12:15 and 12:18 a.m., but it's hard to tell how much snow was on her side windows that may have prevented her from seeing John walking on the road as she went in reverse, but her SUV's backup camera had a 360 view, blind spot warning lights on the side mirrors, and made beeping noises to alert her of objects nearby. Next, I'm going to review Karen's phone calls with Jen. 4:53 a.m. Karen said they got in a fight, she left John at the Waterfall bar, and he did not come home. 5:05 a.m. Jen told Karen she saw her SUV outside the Alberts house. Karen wondered if she could have hit John and talked about her taillight. 2 minutes later, Karen turned her SUV on, slowly backed into John's car, and drove around Canton looking for John. The night before, after Karen left Waterfall, she did a 3-point turn after passing Fairview. Google Maps shows no mailbox or anything Karen could have backed into. Then she parked outside the Alberts and finally pulled into John's garage. How would Karen know at 5:05 a.m. there was damage to her taillight? She connected to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36 a.m., then called John 7 times before turning her SUV off at 12:42 a.m. and walked inside. She left a 12:42 a.m. voicemail that only has the sound of her car and taking steps that she said were inside and not to look at the back of her SUV, but it's unknown if she got out in the 6 minutes before she turned her car off. At 4:38 a.m., Karen called her mother and then John and others. Did she wake up and walk in the garage and saw her taillight damage, and that prompted the string of phone calls? What was so important that Karen didn't care about waking up her mother? Karen returned to John's garage to leave at 5:07 a.m. to drive around and to get Jen, and that is when she tapped John's car backing out of his garage. She knew the Ring camera would capture her right taillight hitting John's car. It is unknown if that was the first time in 2 years of spending many nights at his home that Karen hit his car despite her SUV's warning system. Did she get out of her SUV in between 12:36 to 12:42 a.m. phone calls and saw her taillight was damaged, and that is why that Ring video is missing? Dr. Welcher proved the 1-mile-per-hour collision with John's SUV was not capable of breaking her taillight. If Karen didn't hit John, how did she get a broken taillight and large dent? In the Against This column, Karen said she talked to her mother often and reached out to get her opinion on what was happening. She said there was a blizzard with young children unattended, and John had never disappeared like that. Karen didn't know if something went wrong, or if John took advantage of Karen by ignoring her so she would watch the kids while he stayed out drinking. The problem with this is that Karen and John talked to Jen as they left Waterfall, and Karen drove her SUV while John called Jen twice to get directions for them both to go continue drinking at the Alberts house while John's nephew was sleeping at a friend's, and his niece was likely asleep at 12:15 a.m. because she testified she went to bed at 11 p.m. Karen's story number 1 on January 29th, she told police she had stomach issues and dropped John off. This indicates she was okay with John continuing to drink and Karen would return to his house. There was no confusion or conflict about where John was. Karen's story number 2, years later, Karen saw John skip up the Alberts driveway and open the side door after Karen asked him to make sure they were at the correct home, despite Waze and Jen confirming the location. Karen said she called John a few minutes after he didn't confirm it was okay to come inside, but he didn't answer, so Karen drove away angry and did not walk to the door to make sure John was okay. However, 3 witnesses proved they were the ones who parked at the driveway, and John never exited Karen's SUV by the flagpole until after the pickup truck pulled away. Phone records proved Karen didn't call John until 9 minutes after they arrived at the Alberts, which was after she drove away, not while she waited. This indicates Karen spent about 7 minutes in her SUV with John parked outside the Alberts house and surely would remember the reason neither of them exited for an extended period of time. By the time John got out, they would have agreed he would stay and she would leave, or argued that he would stay and she would leave. 2 minutes later, Karen left John a voicemail screaming, "John, I effing hate you," which indicates they argued that John wanted to stay and Karen wanted to leave, so Karen should not have worried that John ignored her messages after that, because she knew he got out of her SUV to go inside the party. In Karen's 2020 interview, she said she was just going to drive around in the 2 square miles that we spent the preceding night. After about 20 minutes of driving around, I go to get Jen. Data showed it was more like 30 minutes, but I'm not criticizing Karen for the discrepancy. However, at 5:05 a.m., Jen told Karen they saw her SUV outside 34 Fairview Road. But Karen immediately got in her SUV at 5:07 a.m. and drove to the Waterfall Bar, passed the library at 5:15 a.m., then about 20 minutes later arrived at Jen's house saying they need to go to Fairview. Why couldn't Karen have immediately driven to Fairview on her own at 5:07 a.m.? Karen did not drive to 34 Fairview Road alone at 6 a.m. to discover his body. Did she drive by Fairview before she arrived at Jen's? Cameras showed her SUV near the bars. But then there's about 20 minutes that are unaccounted for. This does not prove she drove by Fairview alone before 5:30 a.m. and knew John was in the snow. Karen's phone data did not prove that she connected to the cell phone tower antenna near 34 Fairview in the missing 20 minutes between approximately 5:15 to 5:35 a.m. People may argue Karen did not know the address of 34 Fairview Road, but she admitted John told her it was 34 Fairview when he was on the phone with Jen getting directions, and Karen drove from 34 Fairview to John's house 4.5 hours earlier. Karen talked to Procter & Buchanan on January 29th. Quote, "The defendant indicated that she first observed the broken taillight in the morning and did not know how she had broken it the previous evening. Karen told police she broke it the previous evening, not at 5:07 a.m. when she backed into John's car. Karen drove from the Alberts to John's, pulled in the garage, and walked in the door. At 5:05 a.m., she talked to Jen and got in her car at 5:07 a.m., pulled out, lightly tapped John's car, drove around Canton for 30 minutes, and pulled in Jen's driveway and then walked out and started screaming Jen's name. Jen was the one who drove Karen's car to John's, and the Ring video does not show Karen stop or stare at her rear taillight. So when did Karen observe her taillight was broken? She showed Jen and Kerry when they left John's around 5:52 a.m., but she told the two women before that about her damaged taillight. Karen did not pull into John's garage for another 6 minutes after she arrived. She called him several times, but had time to get out of her car and see if there was any damage before she pulled into his garage, but this Ring video is missing. Jen and Kerry testified Karen showed them her taillight and it was cracked and missing pieces, but John's Ring video showed they all went inside when they arrived at John's house, but the video of them leaving is missing. Karen said on ABC News, quote, "I had told both Jen and Kerry that I cracked my taillight, and I said I just hit my car on top of everything, but I did not look at the damage. And both women said, it's cracked, calm down, you cracked your taillight, you're okay, let's go look for John," end quote. So if Karen did not look at the damage, how did she know she cracked her taillight? Karen also did an interview with Gretchen Voss and stated, quote,
When my car was seized, there was a few small pieces of taillight missing that I had picked out at John's at 5:45 before we drove over to Fairview. I'm showing Jim and Terry, look what I just did to my light, and I'm worried that there's going to be some kind of electric short circuit. There's like the bulb is showing, and some of the red plastic's missing. So I picked pieces out of the light housing that had kind of collapsed within the light and dropped them in John's driveway.
Karen said she hit her car, but did not explain how. She said it just happened, which could mean hitting John's car at 1 mile per hour at 5:07, but the Ring video and Dr. Welcher proved that did not cause any damage. But as she pulled out of John's driveway at 5:07 a.m., her right taillight was damaged. According to Jen, Karen told her on the phone that she could have hit John and talked about her taillight before Karen backed into John's car. More conflicting statements from Karen. She did not look at the damage, yet she admitted she looked at the damage with Kerry and Jen, and pieces were missing, and she picked some out. Karen said she dropped pieces of her taillight in John's driveway, but no one ever found them. When state police reconstructed the pieces found outside the Alberts house, only the top left pieces were never found. Against this, the defense argued Karen's taillight did not have the same amount of damage at 4:12 p.m. when the tow truck seized it at Karen's parents compared to Karen's light on February 1st at Canton Police Department. But Officer Barros admitted in trial too that the 5:07 a.m. and 8:22 a.m. Ring videos were the same condition that he saw around 4:12 p.m. People say the police planted taillight pieces at 34 Fairview after Karen's SUV arrived at Canton Police Department at 5:31 p.m., but the search team did not find any pieces in the snow until 5:45 p.m. There is no evidence someone broke Karen's taillight at Canton Police Department, drove to 34 Fairview, and joined the search and planted pieces. Although some people say the missing video from Canton Police is when they cracked her taillight and drove it to 34 Fairview. The Ring video of Karen, Jen, and Kerry arriving at John's house revealed that Karen moves her left hand in an odd motion to either smack her right arm or touched her right taillight. Her hand seems to be on her jacket as she moves away from the taillight, but it's very close to the light, and I don't know why she would hit her own arm or hit the taillight. Against this, it's too blurry to determine, and what would be the purpose of her smacking her taillight. When Karen's dad drove her SUV from the hospital and John's house to her parents' house at 2:12 p.m., they got out and both of them stood at the back right taillight and looked at it before the video stops. This was before the police had access to her SUV. Karen has no explanation for her taillight and the dent and paint chip damage. As I said before, Dr. Welcher proved the 5:07 a.m. 1 mile per hour reversing into John's SUV would not have even touched Karen's taillight to John's SUV. Karen and her father looked toward the right taillight when they were dropped off at John's house. Her brother barely glanced at it while walking past. Another female looked at it for a few seconds. Karen's brother and another male wiped snow from parts of their car and Karen's, but did not touch her rear taillight. Against this, they did not stand there and inspect it like the 2:12 p.m. video at her parents' house. Why did Karen call and text John repeatedly over 50 times if he got out of her SUV and was going inside to continue hanging out with people they just hung out with? They had just confirmed the location with Jen, but John did not exit Karen's SUV for 6 or 7 minutes after they parked. What took so long for either one of them to get out? This does not indicate John got out of Karen's SUV on good terms. Against this, Karen may have convinced some people that she saw John walk into Albert's house and he was a jerk for not coming to get her or answer her messages, but the witnesses and data prove that story was a lie. When I started looking at this case, I had an open mind, but one of the things I don't like about Karen is that she repeatedly tries to make John O'Keefe look like a jerk that he walked inside the Alberts house and never contacted her to say it was okay to come in. She also accuses him of not answering her phone call when she called outside the Alberts house, but the data proved she didn't call until she drove away. She has no problem trying to place blame on John when the data and eyewitnesses prove that wasn't even true. Karen acted guilty the morning John died, telling many people she hit John. She did not offer condolences to John's mom, niece, or nephew, and told John's sister-in-law they would probably never see each other again, and that Karen had to remember the bad times so she would not be sad John was dead. If Karen knew John had gone inside the Alberts house, she would have acted like a victim who needed to mourn the loss of John like everyone else in his family. Instead, she just got her things and left John's home. Later, Karen explained she thought John's mom saw her broken taillight and assumed Karen hit him, but Karen should have explained the reason why the back right of her SUV sustained damage and told John's family they all needed to figure out what happened inside the Alberts home. She didn't do that. Canton police officer Stephen Sarif, the first on the scene, testified Karen kept saying, quote, "This is all my fault. This is my fault. I did this," end quote. He saw footprints around John's body, but none from the direction of the house. Against this, in 5.5 hours, snow could have covered the tracks from the house, but some people argue the plow driver did not see John at 2:45 and 3:15 and suggest he was put outside later by somebody inside the house. At 12:59 a.m., voicemail number 3, Karen said, quote, "John, I'm here with your effing kids. Nobody knows where the F you are, you effing pervert," end quote. Why did Karen say nobody knows when she hadn't asked anyone if they knew where John was? Or if she saw him walk in the Alberts house 30 minutes earlier, she knew where he was. Why didn't Karen complain, "Why didn't you call me," to say it was okay to come inside? I have no idea why she called him a pervert, especially when she was the one who kissed Brian Higgins and texted that she would hook up with him. 1:04 a.m., Karen texted John she was at her house in Mansfield, but she was at John's. What happened in the car between Waterfall and 34 Fairview to make Karen call John a pervert who she hated and caused her to lie about her whereabouts? Karen called John 14 times between 12:33 a.m. after she left Fairview until she turned her SUV off at 12:42 a.m. in John's garage. Once inside John's house, she called or texted him 20 times without any response, but never thought to get back in her car and drive 4 minutes back to Fairview to figure out why John was not answering the phone. She never contacted Higgins, who was inside the Alberts house, but she called her mom at 1:14 a.m. She left John voicemails calling him a loser and pervert who was having sex with another woman, and then Karen went to sleep. At 4:38 and 4:42 a.m., Karen also called her mom. What was so important to wake up her parents? Against this, in a TV interview, Karen said she would call her mother for her opinion and said she was concerned John did not come home or answer his messages. Another reason for Karen being responsible for John's death, John's cell phone temperature steadily decreased, indicating he never went in a warm house. Canton paramedic Jason Becker took Karen to the hospital in the ambulance. He testified Karen was sad that the last thing she said to John was during an argument, but did not detail what the argument was or what she said. Karen asked Jen to Google hypothermia or how long it takes for someone to die in the cold because Karen knew John did not go inside Fairview and die inside and then was put on the lawn. She knew something happened when she drove in reverse. Against this, people argue Jen searched how long it takes to die in the cold at 2:27 a.m., but two experts proved Jen's searches were at 6:23 and 6:24 a.m., and dashcam video confirmed Jen's story that she and Karen were off camera at that time. Karen said while Jen was giving John directions to 34 Fairview, Jen said it was near Ashley's house. Ashley hooked up with John before he dated Karen. So how does Karen remember that level of detail, but not a few minutes later, of when and where John got out of her SUV, and that Karen did not actually call John until 12:33 after she drove away? Karen's SUV accelerated up to 24.2 miles per hour, then the speed dropped to 23.6 miles per hour, half a second later, as the steering wheel jostled slightly, which is consistent with a pedestrian strike. Starting at 4:38 a.m., Karen called and texted her mom, John, Jen, Kerry, Michael Camerano, and Katie Camerano, but never called 911. ARCA stated that they didn't think John's arm hit Karen's taillight at 24 miles per hour, but in their 24 mile per hour testing, the damage to the test Lexus taillight was similar to Karen's damage. Against this, Dr. Rentschler testified the number of holes in John's sweatshirt right sleeve did not match the number of abrasions on John's arm, and there were multiple directions of the abrasions. The defense argued the holes in the back of John's sweatshirt were made by state police lab scientists and were not present when John's body was discovered. Text messages between John and people inside 34 Fairview indicate he was not inside after he and Karen arrived at 12:24 a.m. 12:20 a.m., Brian Higgins sent a text, "You coming here?" John read it at 12:25. 12:27, Jen texted, "Here?" John read that message 15 seconds later. 12:31 and 47 seconds, Jen texted, "Pull behind me." John read it at 12:32 and 6 seconds. At 12:31 and 56 seconds, John walked for 20 seconds. Did John not respond to those three text messages? Because he was arguing with Karen in her SUV. Against this, Jen walked to the Alberts front door and saw Karen's SUV at several places. 1 in front of the door, 2 at the flagpole, 3 further up from the flagpole, and 4 gone, but is not sure if she went to the door 5 times and texted John after each. Just a quick review of her 5 text messages. 12:27 saw the SUV in the front and texted, "Here." 12:31 saw the SUV near the flagpole and texted, "Pull behind me." 12:40, "Hello." 12:42, "Where are you?" 12:45, "Hello." Jen texted, "Pull behind me" at 12:31 and 47 seconds, and 9 seconds later, at 12:31 and 56 seconds, John started walking for the first time since they arrived at Fairview. However, Jen said she saw the SUV further up a third time, but that doesn't seem possible based on the time data from John's phone and Karen's SUV. Originally, experts said Karen's SUV went in reverse between 12:31:38 and 12:31:43 a.m., but this time does not seem accurate because Jen texted 4 seconds later at 12:31:47 and said the SUV was parked near the flagpole. Unless Jen saw the SUV at the front door, and then she turned around and started typing the text and then sent it. For trial 2, the phone expert adjusted the SUV reverse trigger event, hitting 30% throttle at some point between 12:32:04 and 12:32:12, 17 to 25 seconds after Jen sent that text. I don't understand how Jen could have seen the SUV at a third location, since her next text was at 12:40 when Karen was parked in John's driveway and John's phone stopped moving after 12:32:16. I don't see how it benefits Jen to lie that she saw the SUV in 3 places as opposed to 2, but several other witnesses saw Karen's SUV at up to 4 locations on the street. Jen's husband Matt saw the SUV parked in front of the house, near the flagpole, past the fire hydrant, in line with the trees that separate the neighbor's property line, and then the SUV was gone. Police reports stated that both Jen and Matt said they saw the SUV driving away from the Alberts house, but the police mischaracterized other statements from people in the reports, so it's unknown what the truth is. At trial 2, Attorney Jackson said during trial 1, Jen agreed with him when he asked if she was at the door 5 times and then would text John after each time. Jen replied she may not have been clear on that detail, but she is clear she went to the door 3 times, but doesn't remember if the SUV was still out front when she texted hello at 12:40. Carrie's rear left window was covered in snow and possibly tinted. How did Karen see John as they approached Fairview in the snowstorm? Both Carrie and Jen did not notice John from the front seat. Against this, Karen said John's body stuck out like a buffalo on a prairie, and she was expecting to find him on the side of the road. Karen left John a voicemail at 6:03 a.m. that starts with Karen outside screaming after she found John's body. Why did she call John for the first time since 5:36 and not hang up her phone, but leave it recording in Carrie's car? Jen said Karen directed them to 34 Fairview because she knew where John was. Jen testified Karen was, quote, screaming between Carrie and I, so I'm not really sure how she saw John over here when her head is up here screaming and then looking down and texting. Did Karen dial at that moment to purposely capture it on voicemail? Karen told police she made a 3-point turn after dropping John off. But when they asked her to recall how she left the scene again, Karen terminated the interview. If she is innocent, why did she stop cooperating with the police? Karen's SUV data showed the 3-point turn before they arrived at Fairview, not after. Against this, it is recommended to not talk to the police without an attorney, and some people say with an attorney. Why did Karen drive to Jen's house and yell they needed to drive to the Alberts house after Karen just drove through town for almost 30 minutes supposedly looking for John? Why couldn't Karen drive to Fairview by herself before going to Jen's if Jen told her during their 5:05 a.m. phone call she saw Karen parked outside Fairview? Karen was so frantic to get in contact with John from 12:33 to 5 a.m., but when she got in her car at 5:07 a.m., she drove to the second and third places she last saw John, the Canton bars, not the last place she saw him at the Alberts home. Did Karen drive by Fairview before going to Jen's? Karen's first assumption was maybe the bars had let people in after hours and that John got killed by a snowplow, but Karen has also stated the last time she saw John was walking into a house with the friends they just spent the past hour having fun with. Against this, Karen's cell phone connected to towers around Canton, and there was not strong evidence to show that Karen drove by the Alberts house alone before she arrived at Jen's house. At 1:27 p.m. on January 29th, Karen Googled DUI attorneys. Trooper Proctor called her at 1:19 p.m. Against that, anyone should call an attorney if they drove drunk and just talked to the police. Dr. Welcher's analysis proved Karen's taillight did not make contact with John's car at less than 1 mile per hour. So Karen damaged her light before 12:36 a.m. when she returned to John's home. Karen never explained how her SUV had a major dent with chipped paint and a broken taillight. She ignored text messages from Brian Higgins for 6 days. The day John died, at 11:54 a.m., she finally replied with 2 words, John died. She knew Higgins left for 34 Fairview before she left Waterfall. Why wouldn't she text him, did you hear John died? I saw him go inside. What happened in there? Please call me. Why didn't she call him or text him to ask where John was before they found his body? If Karen told John she was having stomach issues and dropped him off at the party on good terms, why would she need to call him repeatedly and say she hated him, accuse him of cheating, and say no one knew where he was? She sat outside John's house for 6 minutes calling him and leaving rude voicemails. If she had stomach issues, why didn't she go inside to use the bathroom? Karen stopped cooperating with police and never gave police her phone's passcode, and it took them about 6 months for software to finally crack her code. John's Ring security videos are missing 3 videos. One is Karen getting home from 34 Fairview at 12:36 a.m. Next, Karen leaving John's house with Jen and Kerry and showing her picking pieces of her damaged taillight. And third, Karen's SUV leaving John's home for the last time. But there is video of her father and brother wiping snow off their cars. It seems to benefit Karen more than the police to have deleted these videos. Against this, Karen had no access to John's phone since it was under his body at Fairview. She would not have access to John's computer after she left John's house with her father, so she could not delete missing video number 3. Trooper Guarino said there was no evidence on John's computers that Karen accessed Ring on January 29th. Trooper Proctor had access to Ring on John's phone, but said he did not delete any videos. He submitted 2 search warrants to Ring to get the missing videos, but was told Ring had no record of who accessed the account to delete them, and Ring did not have them. Trooper DeChico viewed John's Ring videos and wrote a note with 0041 signifying the time of 12:41 a.m., and he wrote, "Taillights from driveway, I think she arrived home." Proctor's report reflected bullet points of important Ring video times, but Proctor said there was no date on DeChico's note, and they looked at videos from many different dates. Karen connected to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36 a.m., so it is unknown if DeChico, referencing 12:41, was on January 29th. But it seems odd that Karen would also have returned to John's home at 12:41 a.m. on another night. People assume because her phone connected to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36, that meant she was in his house or near the garage, but maybe it connected when she was parked on the street. Karen turned off her car at 12:42 and 8 seconds. Maybe she did pull into John's driveway at 12:41, but was parked on the street for some reason. In the 2 weeks before John's death, Karen's text messages with Brian Higgins revealed she was frustrated with John and willing to cheat on him. Did that frustration reach a boiling point after all of their arguing on January 28th, and then spill over when they got to the Alberts house and John finally got out of Karen's car while arguing? Her frustration pushed her gas pedal down to 74% throttle to catch up to John in reverse. Karen never spoke again to various people she was friendly with. Against that, her phone was seized. Karen did not go to John's wake or funeral. Against that, she was concerned his family thought she was responsible. At some point, John's family told her to stay away. Reasons Karen would not want to go inside the Alberts house: stomach issues, she wanted to drive home before the blizzard got bad, she argued with John in the car and was in a bad mood, or Karen wanted to go home so John's niece was not home alone. 2 weeks after Karen accused John of cheating, and 2 weeks before John died, Karen planted a kiss on Brian Higgins at John's house and told Higgins she was happy with John, but things have deteriorated. Karen said she would have hooked up with Higgins. Karen ignored him at Waterfall, but she pulled up to Fairview, and although she said she did not see any cars that she recognized, she likely knew Higgins had a Jeep because she recently went to his house. Did Karen refuse to go in the Alberts house because she didn't want to be close to Higgins and could not avoid him like she did at Waterfall? Against that, she said the house was dark and she wasn't sure if they were at the right house. Eye roll. However, there were 9 people having a party inside and the front door was open, and John used Waze to find the house. They were at the right house. After returning to John's, Karen slept on the couch but had her own bedroom at John's house. If she dropped John off due to her stomach issues, why would she want to sleep downstairs? Why did she want to know when John walked in the door? Was it to confirm that he got up off the ground after she drove away from Fairview? Against that, it can be argued that John wasn't answering her calls and Karen wanted to know when he got home, but she told police on January 29th that she dropped John off, so why was there a need to contact him dozens of times and know when he got home? In her TV interview on the ID network, Karen said, quote,
Totally love Jen McCain. Jen McCain, it's me or her. Either I'm going down, Jen, or you are.
I saw that and I thought, who talks like that? Where does Karen's animosity for Jen come from? The majority of evidence points to Karen causing John's death and not Jen, who was texting John repeatedly while he was with Karen outside Fairview, and Jen was inside with other people at the party. Against this, people say Karen is innocent and framed and angry at Jen for partaking in some kind of conspiracy. I'm not one of those people, as you can see by this long-ass spreadsheet. The day Karen found John dead, she frantically talked to many people: civilians, paramedics, and police. but was not frantic that someone else could be responsible other than her. Karen heard Jen giving directions to John and knew Jen was inside when Karen dropped John off. Yet Karen never questioned Jen as they were on the phone or driving around before 6 a.m. Like, hey, I saw John go up to the side door. What happened when he got inside? When Jen said John never came inside, but they saw Karen's SUV, Karen should have argued that she saw John go in the side door. Karen repeatedly screamed, "Jen, Carrie," after she found John, but was only heard saying, "I hit him. Could I have hit him? Did I hit him? Is he dead?" Because if she hit him and the result was that John died, that meant the more trouble Karen would be in. Against that, people may say Karen was still intoxicated and traumatized to think rationally, but the data does not point to someone inside the Alberts house wounding John. This is essentially a double entry, but I'm going to read it again, because I think it's a big issue. Karen never asked Brian Higgins what happened to John once he got inside. After not replying to texts from Higgins for 6 days, at 11:54 a.m., almost 6 hours after she found her boyfriend of 2 years dead in the snow, Karen read that Higgins texted her while at Waterfall Bar, and Karen replied, "John died." Karen made no effort to find out who was responsible and if Higgins could help solve the mystery. She had exchanged many flirty texts with Higgins over the prior 2 weeks, but was not capable of reaching out to him at 5 a.m. or later to ask John's friend and fellow law enforcement officer and person inside the Alberts house to find John's killer. Against that, people could argue Karen did not want to interact with Higgins after she went to his house a week or so earlier, and it did not end well, but her boyfriend was missing and then found dead, yet she made no effort to find out who did it. That day, she told police she never saw John go inside, but years later in TV interviews, she said she saw him go in the Alberts side door. Karen only started blaming other people after a man called her attorney, David Yannetti, and said to look into the other people inside the Alberts party as suspects. As stated in her ID interview, the day John died, Karen told attorney Yannetti she could have hit John's foot or knee, but why would she be open to that possibility if a few hours earlier she told police she dropped John off and made a 3-point turn, but her car data and John's phone showed she only made a 3-point turn after she missed the turn on Fairview? If she drove forward after John got out, how could she have hit him if he walked in the opposite direction of where her car was going? Did Karen try to cover for herself to say she made the 3-point turn after John got out and she could have hit him without knowing it, and hoped her car data would not be accurate enough to show exactly when and where the 3-point turn happened? Karen did not give police her phone password, and it took police about 6 months to crack it. If you know you are innocent and want to clear your name so the real killers of your boyfriend can be found, do you hinder the investigation? Against that, people may argue that Karen was immediately the main suspect, and her attorney would handle her defense. But Karen talked to journalists more than the police. Her actions are more about saving herself than getting justice for John, just like she said in this clip. Play that clip, funky white boy.
Now I just want to save myself, and I just want to be who I was before this, and I care less about fighting for John.
Karen's comments to Erin O'Keefe, who is the wife of Paul, John's brother. Karen texted her on January 28th, quote, "Just another day. I wish I didn't talk to an O'Keefe after 2004, end quote, after Karen said they fought about taking his niece to Dunkin' Donuts in the morning. After John's body was found, Karen said she did not think she would see them again, and she had to remember the bad times, so she wasn't sad that John was dead. Karen said she dropped John at the party because she did not want to go. Karen didn't offer any condolences or try to find who killed John. She just gave up and said she would never see his family again. Phone expert Ian Whiffen noted that between 12:25 and 6 a.m., records of 10 meters accuracy or less of John's phone location showed the center point was never in the Alberts house after they arrived, only on the lawn. The center dots can indicate movement or refinement of the phone's accuracy with the antenna and signal. John's phone was likely near the flagpole and didn't move the entire night, according to Whiffen. Most of John's phone location data accurately showed on the road as Karen drove them to Fairview, indicating the location data is reliable. In all of Karen's interviews and variety of stories, she never mentioned the following. John used the Waze navigation app to find the Alberts house and closed it 12 seconds before they parked at 34 Fairview Road, and when their location was passing the house next to the Alberts. There should have been no question Karen parked at the right house. She never mentioned driving her SUV forward a few times based on eyewitness testimony of her SUV being at different locations. She never mentioned going in reverse at a high speed. The day John died, Karen told police she made a 3-point turn after dropping John off because she had stomach issues, but the car and John's phone data showed that was a lie. There were people standing at the glass front door of the Alberts house looking to see when they were coming in. They said Karen is parked directly in front of it. So Karen should have seen that door and people while looking at and talking to John for 7 minutes after they parked. I never saw her mention the pickup truck that was parked behind her for several minutes before it drove by. She never mentioned Julie Nagel exiting and entering the home after standing in the driveway for several minutes. She never mentioned arguing with John in the car, at least publicly in her TV interviews. Karen said she pulled up and wanted John to check it out, and he got out. The police report stated, quote, "The defendant informed Miss McCabe that she and the victim had gotten into an argument the last time that she had seen him," end quote. Karen also said something similar in the ambulance to the hospital, but never in TV interviews. John's niece testified, quote, "She was just pacing down the hallway, asking what could have happened. She said, maybe I did something. Later, maybe a snowplow hit him," end quote. John's niece heard Karen's morning calls with Jen McCabe, and Karen changed her story multiple times, initially stating that she and John got into an argument and she dropped him off. Based on their many text messages on January 28th, it's not hard to believe they continued their fight after they left Waterfall and had time alone. John's niece and nephew told police that Karen and John had argued frequently before his death, and John told Karen he needed a break and their relationship had run its course, and he told her to leave his house, but Karen refused to leave or end their relationship. We're almost done, with this spreadsheet at least. Finally, John's phone data revealed the following. His GPS location was never in the Alberts house. At 12:24 a.m., they parked outside the Alberts house at 34 Fairview Road. Also at 12:24 a.m., John read the text message from Brian Higgins, "You coming here?" 31 seconds after arrival. John did not reply. 12:27 a.m., Jen texted John, "Here?" and he read that message 15 seconds later without replying. 12:29, Jen called John. Phone records showed it was answered for 7 seconds, but Jen testified she never spoke to him after giving directions at 12:18. 12:30, John's phone disconnected from Karen's SUV Bluetooth, so it likely had not been inside the Alberts home for the 6 minutes since he and Karen parked. Between 12:31 and 56 seconds and 12:32 and 16 seconds, John took 36 steps in those 20 seconds. This was the first time in the 7 minutes since parking that John took steps. 12:32 a.m., John looked at Jen's message stating to pull behind her car, but did not reply. And 3 seconds later, he locked his phone, and 7 seconds after that, John's phone stopped moving until it was found under his body near the flagpole around 6 a.m. Also at 12:32 a.m., Karen's car went in reverse up to 24 miles per hour. However, the time is challenged by the defense. 1 minute later at 12:33 was the first time Karen called or texted John since they arrived at 34 Fairview after she pulled away, which goes against her statements on TV. At 12:36 a.m., Karen connected to John's home Wi-Fi. The quickest online video I saw, traveling from the Alberts to John's house, was 3 minutes and 40 seconds, which could make this time possible. 1 minute later at 12:37, Karen left John a voicemail screaming, which proves that Karen was angry after John got out of her car at the Alberts. She had been frustrated he did not want to talk to her earlier in the day. Was she frustrated enough again that she slammed her foot on the gas pedal in reverse to catch up to John after he walked out of her car? I just reviewed my spreadsheet. Karen did it, with reasons for and against Karen being responsible for John's death. I have another spreadsheet. Someone else did it. So as I was researching and come across a fact or a rumor that might point to somebody else instead of Karen causing John's death, I put it on the spreadsheet. Similar to the other spreadsheet, on the left-hand side, reasons for someone else causing John's death. Then I try to think of things possibly conflicting that in the against column. This spreadsheet has 45 rows. So, first reason for someone else other than Karen causing John's death. John's phone moved 87 meters, 80 steps, and 3 flights climbed between 12:21 and 10 seconds and 12:24 and 22 seconds a.m., which means he was in the Alberts house and basement where he was attacked. Against this, The three-point turn after Karen passed Fairview Road was confirmed by John's phone and Karen's SUV to show that he could not be walking and climbing stairs before they parked at 12:24 and 38 seconds a.m. Defense expert Green agreed John's first GPS location data point at the Alberts driveway was at 12:24:28 a.m. At 12:23, Ryan Nagel texted his sister Julie they were about to arrive at Fairview. Those three people in the truck behind Karen said John never got out in the estimated 4 to 7 minutes they testified they were there. Below that, I wrote, see longer explanation. And it's pretty long. There's debate about the three different clocks on an iPhone and which one was most accurate. Like when the data showed between 12:21 to 12:24 that John took 80 steps and went up or down 3 flights of stairs. A floor climbed is when the iPhone measures a change of approximately 10 feet. This is an important point that many people who think Karen is innocent claim as a fact, so I tried to analyze if it makes sense that John was going up and down stairs 3 times and was killed inside the Alberts house, but it doesn't make sense for several reasons. At 12:22 and 14 seconds a.m., a Celebrate report showed John's phone on stairs, but his phone location was a half-mile away from Fairview while Karen was driving, which brings up a separate point that if some phone data is wrong, how do we know which phone data is 100% correct? Also, phone expert Ian Whiffen tested holding his phone while driving around Canton, Mass., and it registered steps and stairs even though he was driving. Plus, 12 eyewitnesses and data showed John's GPS center location point was never in the Alberts house for him to even be able to use the stairs or get attacked by people or a dog. If you ignore that data and you want to believe John was killed inside the Alberts house, how do you account for 3 flights of stairs climbed? Did John walk through the side door, then down to the basement, back up to the first floor, then back down to the basement where he was attacked? If people inside wanted to attack him, why not do it the first time down in the basement, when his phone would have showed only 1 flight of stairs climbed? Did John walk in the side door, then upstairs to the second floor, back down to the main level, then down to the basement? It's all speculation, just like which of the people inside could have been the person to attack John. Nobody knows for sure. At the end of the 3 flights climbed data, after 12:24:22 a.m., the next time John's phone registered steps was 7.5 minutes later, for 20 seconds between 12:31:56 and 12:32:16. John's phone moved 36 steps and about 85 feet. So if John was dead in the basement and the group plotted a conspiracy over the next 6 minutes, then at least 2 people carried this 200-pound man's body to the front lawn and put his phone under his body. But why isn't there any phone data at 12:32 a.m. for 1 flight of stairs climbed going up, getting John's body out of the basement? Karen said she called John while she was parked at the Alberts driveway after he did not return to tell her it was okay to come inside. The first time Karen called John on January 29th was at 12:33 a.m. So why didn't Karen see several people drag John to the flagpole between 12:31 to 12:32? Things that make you go, Because the 3 people in the pickup truck said they were the ones who parked at the driveway. John never got out of Karen's SUV in front of them, and for Karen to connect to John's home Wi-Fi at 12:36, she had to be driving at 12:33, which meant Karen left her boyfriend at Fairview without making sure he was okay and didn't need a ride home, and she lied about what unfolded outside Fairview. Also, John's phone closed his Waze navigation app 4 seconds after the end of the alleged climbing up 3 flights of stairs. I don't know many people who keep the Waze app open and making noise still giving directions after they parked and are walking around a party inside a house. Data showed John was in Karen's car driving 17 miles per hour when he closed the Waze app at 12:24 and 26 seconds. One of the biggest pieces of data that goes against this theory that John was going up and down stairs and killed inside the Alberts home by his friends between 12:21 to 12:24:22 a.m. is you have to assume that 37 seconds after that movement ended, the killers took John's phone and held it up to his unconscious dead face at 12:24 and 59 seconds to use his Face ID to open his phone, and then opened the text message from Higgins asking, "You coming here?" But they did not delete that text message. Then the killers locked John's phone, and they had Jen text John at 12:27 asking, "Here?" They held John's phone to his dead face to read that message. Then they locked his phone again. Then at 12:29, Jen allegedly called John for 7 seconds, and at 12:30, John's phone disconnected from Karen's SUV's Bluetooth. At 12:31:47, the group of killers had Jen send John another text that said, "Pull behind me." 9 seconds later, at 12:31:56, John's phone started moving for the first time in 7.5 minutes since 12:24. It traveled 36 steps, approximately 85 feet, and while the phone was moving, someone held the phone to John's dead face at 12:32:04 to unlock it. And what did they do? They opened his Messages app and read the last text from Jen. Then at 12:32:09, pushed the lock button again. And 7 seconds later, at 12:32:16, John's phone was put on the ground between the flagpole and the street and never moved again. In those last 20 seconds of movement, John's phone moved 85 feet. The Albert's front stairs to the area where John was found, near the flagpole, was measured at 72 feet. So far, does that scenario seem plausible to you? If so, please don't go driving because you're intoxicated. So either several people carried or dragged John's body from the house to the lawn while another person held his phone to his dead face just to read a text message sent by Jen. Or if you are one of the people who believe the snowplow driver did not see John's body at 2 to 3 a.m. because you think John's body was in the Albert's basement or garage, that means someone had to put John's phone in front of his dead face at 12:32:04 and had 12 seconds to run outside to the flagpole to put his phone on the ground, and then later the killers put John's body on top of his phone. But after 3 a.m., the only people who may have been in the Albert's house were Brian, his wife, and his son, but there were no marks in the snow from John's body to the house when they found his body at 6 a.m. And Kerry said the grass under John's body did not have any snow, which would indicate John fell before most of the snow accumulated. Or against that, it could be argued that his body temperature melted the snow later. Also, you have to take into consideration that Jen, who was kind enough to help John with his niece for several years, would not be traumatized by John's sudden murder during the party, that she would then show the group the video for the song "It's Raining Men." This makes no sense, people. But if you think John was killed inside, this is how you have to think it went down. John's iPhone battery showed a consistent decline in temperature from 82 degrees Fahrenheit when he left Waterfall Bar. If he was in the Albert's basement, and that is why the snowplow driver did not see his body by the flagpole at 2:30 a.m., why was John's phone temperature 50 degrees Fahrenheit at 1:36 a.m. and had never moved from the flagpole since 12:32 a.m.? The 3 times of opening John's phone by putting it up to his face just to read text messages from people inside the house, then locking the phone each time, then moving for 20 seconds while John's face is looking at the phone and the phone never moved again, does not add up to a logical scenario, or data, or eyewitness testimony. So like Randy Jackson used to say on American Idol, it's a no for me, dog. I know the majority of people think Karen is innocent. Please explain a logical scenario, how and why the killers repeatedly held John's phone up to his dead face just to read text messages that 2 people already in the house sent. Also, did they put his phone near the flagpole at 12:32 and then put his body there after 3:30? Please make it make sense. Now back to the spreadsheet. The next reason for somebody else possibly killing John, the doctors from ARCA testified damage to Karen's SUV was inconsistent with hitting John. Against that, ARCA's 24-mile-per-hour testing showed the taillight broke similar to Karen's SUV damage, which her car data showed reached 23 to 24 miles per hour within seconds of John last using his phone. Every accident is different depending on many factors. Dr. Welcher's paint test showed the same area of arm contact that lined up with John's right arm possibly hitting Karen's taillight. Karen admitted picking pieces of her damaged taillight before 6 a.m. John had taillight pieces in his clothing, and also his DNA was on the taillight. Next, several doctors stated John's injuries were not consistent with a car accident, did not appear to be caused by glass, plastic, a vehicle, or John hitting his head on grass. And also his body lacked bruising and fractures, so that means someone inside the Albert's house caused John's death. Dr. Rentschler testified the direction of abrasions on John's arm don't line up with motion or kinematics in Welcher's pain test. Against that, John was 6'1", weighed over 200 pounds, was a police officer in his 40s and in good shape. There were pieces of plastic similar to Karen's taillight embedded in his clothing. John's DNA was on Karen's taillight. Also, a hair was found next to Karen's taillight. An expert stated with 95% confidence that at least 99.895% of the population can be excluded as being a source of the hair sample, but John and his maternal relatives could not. Several prosecution doctors testified John's head injury could have been caused by hitting the frozen ground. Dr. Scorti-Bello testified the knee scrape could have been from a sideswipe with a car, and the nose abrasion could be from glass or plastic. John's arm had dog bites, and the owners of 34 Fairview Road had a German Shepherd that had a history of not liking strangers and biting dogs and people, and the dog was rehomed after John's death. Several doctors with extensive experience testified they thought John's arm injuries were from a dog bite or claws. Pig DNA was on John's right sweatshirt sleeve, which meant the Alberts dog ate pig ear treats and then bit John. Against this, there was no dog DNA, hair, or saliva found on John. The Alberts dog got in a fight outside their house in May 2022, 3 months after John died. And the other dog owner tried to break it up and got injured, so the Alberts removed their dog from their home. Why would they not get rid of their dog in February, March, or April if they wanted to hide her as possibly being responsible for John's arm injuries? The injury pattern on John's arm seems odd that a dog would bite the top of his arm, let go, bite the middle of his arm, let go, and then bite the front of his arm. John's left hand only had a faint scratch. If a German Shepherd was eating someone's right arm, they would likely use their left hand to push the dog's mouth away. Dr. Russell admitted John's arm marks and the Alberts dog's teeth sample did not match. Dr. Sheridan and Dr. Russell could not confirm the marks on John's arm were definitely from a dog. They both agreed no other injuries on John appeared to be possibly caused by a dog or other animal. Testimony indicated pig DNA could have been from food that John or somebody else touched and then touched his sleeve. Brian Albert and Brian Higgins went out to dinner before the Waterfall Bar, and they were the first two people that John hugged at the bar. Both of those guys look like they enjoy a good BLT. Bacon, lettuce, and tomato. Now I want to eat one. Maybe they had bacon DNA on their fingers. John's phone data ruled out any encounter with Chloe in the house because he never went in the house. Next, Colin Albert had thrown beer cans and bottles on John's lawn, walked on his lawn, taunted him in a Ring doorbell video, had bruised knuckles on his right hand a month later, and made a video threatening to beat someone up. Colin killed John. Against that, Colin texted his friend, Jen's daughter, Allie, at 11:54 p.m. Quote, "You can get me now." End quote. At 12:10 a.m., Allie replied, "Here," but at 12:11 a.m., John and Karen were on video outside Waterfall, so it's impossible for Colin to have attacked John. He wasn't even at the Alberts' house when John and Karen pulled up, and John never went in the house. The bruised knuckles photo from the defense was from February 26th, but photos from February 11th, 2 weeks earlier, show no injuries on his knuckles. Just a reminder, John died January 29th. Lastly, why would adults stand around and allow 17-year-old Colin to beat up their friend and fellow police officer? Some of these theories are by people who spend too much time at Waterfall Bar. Next theory, Brian Higgins liked Karen and wanted to date her, so he attacked and killed John. Higgins said he parked at the mailbox, but witnesses said his Jeep was not on the street. Higgins estimated he left the Alberts party around 12:30 to 1, but he didn't swipe his card at Canton Police Department until 1:27 a.m. Higgins said he did not call anyone after he left Fairview, but video from his work at Canton Police shows him with an object like a phone near his face at 1:34 a.m., and records show he called Brian Albert at 2:22 a.m. for 22 seconds after a 1-second phone call from Brian Albert that they both said were butt dials and didn't remember making. Higgins said he saw a tall, dark-haired male enter the Alberts. Some people argue this was Colin or John, but Higgins thought it was Julie Nagel's brother, who did not enter. Against these accusations, there is no evidence that Higgins wanted to be in a relationship with Karen so bad that he wanted John dead. He was skeptical about Karen's intentions in their text messages after Karen initiated the kiss at John's house. The first two people John hugged at Waterfall Bar were Higgins and Brian Albert. There was no animosity. The different testimony about where Higgins parked at the Albert's house is suspicious, but not incriminating evidence for an attack on John. Jen, Matt, and Brian said his Jeep was parked on the street in front of the mailbox, but 3 people in the pickup truck behind Karen said they were the ones who parked at the driveway, and there were no cars in between them and Karen. The Canton Police Department video shows Brian holding the phone near his mouth, not really his ear. The phone screen appears to be white, but iPhone screens are usually black when on a phone call. It is unknown if he was listening to a video or a podcast, etc., or on a phone call, because his phone records were not revealed. I don't know how it is known that he called Brian Albert at 2:22 a.m., but not who he was talking to at 1:34 a.m., if anyone. I think he only had to turn over certain records. Higgins knows what John looked like, so he was not the tall, dark-haired male who entered the Albert's house. He would have just said it was John. If Albert called Higgins to conspire about something, why did the call only last 1 second? It makes no sense for that to be some kind of signal for Higgins to call him back instead of just speaking when Albert initiated the call. Next theory, police shattered Karen's taillight and planted it at Fairview over the next few weeks. There was missing video of Karen's SUV in the Canton Police Department Sallyport, indicating that is when police tampered with her light. Against this, there are videos from 5:07 a.m., 8:22 a.m., and 4:12 p.m. showing Karen's taillight as missing pieces before any police officer had a chance to tamper with it. A major part of red is missing from that taillight. Other than the snow melting, I see no major difference between those videos and the February 1st photo at Canton Police Department. Karen's SUV arrived at Canton Police Department at 5:31 p.m., and the first taillight piece was found at 34 Fairview at 5:45. There is no evidence that someone broke 40-plus pieces of Karen's light and drove to Fairview to plant just a couple of those pieces on January 29th. If the police were going to frame Karen and plant evidence, why not find all of the taillight pieces on January 29th instead of multiple days over the next few weeks up to February 18th? Doesn't make sense. Defense expert Richard Green testified in Trial 1 that Jen searched Haas Long to Die in the Cold at 2:27 a.m. and she deleted it. This proves Jen knew that John was injured and outside before his body was found. Jen also deleted phone calls from her log. Against this, 2 experts said Green's 2:27 a.m. estimate was based on when Jen's phone's Safari browser tab was opened, and Whiffen demonstrated live during the trial to show how Green came to that wrong conclusion. Whiffen's company, Celebrate, updated their software to fix the wrong description and avoid future confusion. Jessica Hyde, Style Icon, testified that Jen did not delete the search or phone calls. Jen's phone stored the 200 most recent phone calls. As the 201st call comes in, it deletes the oldest records. Jen signed a consent form to turn her phone over on February 2nd, so the calls from January 29th were auto-deleted, not by Jen. I do have some questions how in 5 days Jen could have had over 200 phone calls, but I have not seen her phone records. In the past 5 years, I don't think I've had 200 phone calls, but nobody likes me. It does not make sense that 2 hours after an attack and murder, Jen searched about her daughter's sports, and then after that, to figure out how long it would take for John to die on the front lawn after something nefarious happened during the party. It does make sense to search that 20 minutes after finding John unresponsive in a blizzard. Jen misspelled the searches, which corresponds to being outside in the cold at 6:23 and 6:24 a.m., and she testified her multiple sclerosis causes issues with her hands. If she was in bed at 2:27 a.m., she could have fixed her misspelling before searching. Some may say she misspelled because she was drunk. Why would Jen be searching for how long to die in the cold if she knew he died inside and then they moved his body to the lawn? Canton paramedic Dan Whitley talked to Karen at the scene, and she asked if John could have survived without a jacket, which lines up with her wondering how long it would take him to die in the cold. Next, Karen said she saw John go inside the Albert side door. Against that, Karen has said a variety of things, and the evidence does not support this or her claim that while she waited, she called John. Phone records prove she didn't call John until 12:33 a.m. when she was driving. 9 witnesses inside and 3 outside stated John never went inside. A snowplow driver, party guests, and random people driving by didn't see John's body. The snowplow driver passed around 2:45 a.m., and his truck has a high vantage point, bright lights, and he said he constantly scanned his periphery for obstacles. When he passed around 3:15 a.m., he saw a Ford Edge, the same car Brian Albert drives, parked near the flagpole. He testified that the Albert family normally does not park on the street, and the plow driver usually calls in vehicles that are on the road because it's blocking their ability to plow. As a courtesy to the Alberts, whom he has known for decades, he didn't call it in. Against that, John's phone stopped moving at the flagpole at 12:32 a.m. It was snowing pretty bad, so the driver's windshield wipers would affect visibility. The snow started to stick to the road and grass by 12:15 a.m. Would it have covered John's body enough in the 2 hours before 2:45 and 3:15 a.m. when the snowplow passed? How could John's phone never move from the flagpole starting at 12:32 a.m. soon after he got out of Karen's car? Then he went inside for a few hours, and then despite everyone leaving before 2 a.m., someone put John on top of his phone between 3:30 and 6 a.m.? It makes no sense. Calgon, take me away. The prosecution said the driver had given different timelines in prior statements and suggested when he saw the Ford Edge was when he was driving on Cedar Crest and looking down Fairview, but not plowing it at that time. The driver is colorblind, which obviously has nothing to do if he actually saw a car, but his snowplow also hit a basketball hoop on the road the same morning, but does not remember that time, but he says he remembers these other times. Also, there was a dumpster across the street from Fairview, but he did not recall seeing that. Next in the reasons for somebody else being guilty column, the Alberts sold 34 Fairview because they are guilty. Against that, Brian testified that his kids had grown up and he and his wife decided to sell their house before John died after Brian's brother sold his house for a good price. They listed their house on November 17th, 2022 for $949,000. It was under contract in February 2023 and it sold on April 10th, 2023 for $905,000. If the Alberts wanted to hide things in the house, why would they even allow someone else to own the house? People say the Alberts' basement flooring was ripped up, which means the Alberts wanted to discard blood and DNA evidence after John was killed. Against that, Brian testified there was water damage in the basement, and most people selling a home make repairs before listing it. This was a planned attack on John. Against that, why would they plan to attack John when Brian Jr. had 2 female friends to celebrate his birthday? Jen invited and expected Karen to also come inside the house. Jen told police that Karen and John got along at the bar. If they all wanted to frame Karen, why wouldn't they tell police that Karen privately told them negative things that would suggest Karen had a motive to hit John? There were a lot of things during the trial that certain witnesses said that did not paint Karen in a bad light. If they were trying to frame her, they could have lied to try to make her look guilty, and they did not. Next, John's injuries show he was beat up and attacked by a dog. Against that, John's black and blue eyes were due to his skull injury. John had no missing teeth or a mouth injury from getting hit in the face, and no broken nose. He had 2 scratches on his nose, and Karen said one of those was from a piece of glass that she removed when she found him. He had no damage to his eye socket, but a small laceration on his right upper eyelid. No defensive wounds, bruised knuckles, and his fingernails were not damaged. He was a 6'1", 200-pound-plus police officer hanging out with friends he just got along with at a bar. John would have fought back if attacked inside the Alberts' home. John had many marks on his right arm, but they are not all the same as if a dog repeatedly bit him, although some experts say it does match up to dog bites. In what scenario would a dog only bite the top of someone's arm, but not anywhere else on their body or hands, and leave no dog DNA, hair, or saliva? Doesn't make sense. Especially when his phone never went in the house where the dog was. Next reason for, Higgins and the McCabe's said that Brian Higgins parked at the mailbox, but the people in the truck said he did not. Against that does not prove John went in the house and was attacked. Jen said she butt-dialed John 7 times and doesn't remember making the phone calls, but she would have had to cancel the call or it would have left voicemails on John's phone, but there weren't any. Against that doesn't prove that John went in the house and was attacked. The police report stated, quote, at 12:45 a.m., Miss McCabe texted Mr. O'Keefe again, hello, and then observed the black SUV drive away from the home, end quote. Karen connected to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36 a.m., so this cannot be true. Against that, in trial 2, Jen said she was only sure about going to the Alberts front door for the 12:27 and 12:32 a.m. text messages to John, but remembered Karen's SUV in front of the house's front door, at the flagpole, ahead of the flagpole, and then not outside at all. There are some inconsistencies there, but it doesn't prove that John ever even went inside. The police report also stated Mr. McCabe said he saw the car in front, more to the left, and then, quote, he observed the same vehicle driving off down Fairview, heading in the same direction it had been facing while parked, end quote. Why didn't Matt McCabe see John on the lawn when he looked outside or drove by when they left around 2 a.m.? Against that, in trial number 2, Matt said he saw an SUV parked in front of the house, then near the flagpole, then past the fire hydrant in line with the trees that separate the neighbor's property line, and then the SUV was gone. Some reasons he may not have seen John's body on the lawn. After they got into their car, he was using windshield wipers to get the snow off, possibly turning the heat on, and focusing on the road after pulling out of the Alberts driveway. There is not a street light near the flagpole to illuminate what is below. For this row, I don't have anything on the left side, but against someone else doing it, if Proctor wanted to frame Karen, why would he delete the ring footage of Karen arriving around 12:36 a.m., and Karen, Kerry, and Jen leaving before 6 a.m., but not delete Karen backing into John's car at 5:07 a.m.? That would be exculpatory evidence, possibly for Karen, to say that was how her taillight cracked. It makes no sense. Karen's defense said John could have been attacked in the Alberts garage. Against that, the Alberts garage is not connected to the main house. That's why there's a door near the side door to get in. Why would Brian Albert return from Waterfall Bar, let their dog out from the bedroom, and then into the backyard to go to the bathroom, and then open the side door and put the dog in the cold garage where John would be for no logical reason, and goes against his phone data? Another reason against someone else doing it, there were 9 people in the house and 3 people in the pickup truck, plus many police officers and paramedics. All of them would have had to conspired to lie to police and at 2 trials under risk of perjury just to protect Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, Colin Albert, or a dog. 6 of those people at the Alberts house were not related to the Alberts or McCabe's. 11 of those people were not related to Brian Higgins. John's phone data aligns with their statements he never entered the home and was never seen walking up the driveway to the home, contrary to whatever Karen said. There is no solid scenario with evidence about John getting attacked by a human or dog inside the Alberts house. It's just people imagining what could have happened. Next reason in the 4 column, police never searched the Alberts home and missed potential evidence. Against that, there is a standard for probable cause, and there wasn't enough evidence. John was found near the street, covered in snow, and missing his shoe and hat. People inside the Alberts house said they saw Karen's SUV, and there are text messages from Jen showing that she was confused why they were parked but never came in. And Karen was telling multiple people she hit him, or asked repeatedly if she could have hit him, and said her white taillight was cracked. By 6 p.m., police found taillight pieces near the crime scene. There was no probable cause there was evidence inside the house, because there was and still is no evidence John was inside the house. The Alberts did not come outside to help at 6 a.m., even though Brian was a first responder as a Boston police officer, and there were loud screams and police lights. Brian Albert and his wife Nicole testified that they keep their phones in their bed in case their kids called for an emergency, but said they did not hear the call from Higgins or multiple calls from Jen. Their dog did not bark when Jen burst into the room around 6:30 a.m., or when people were screaming outside like Karen and Kerry were screaming really loud. And Jen and other people who were inside the house after John was found don't remember seeing the dog. Some people claim Caitlin Albert, their daughter, took the dog to her place after she left the party to hide the evidence of the dog biting John. I don't know. It makes no sense to me. Against that, Jen called her sister Nicole at 5:07 a.m. after Karen contacted Jen. After they found John's body, Jen called Nicole at 6:07 and 6:08 a.m. But even though the records show they were answered, both women say they did not speak on those 3 phone calls. Kerry and Karen were trying to resuscitate John while Jen called 911. Jen is seen on police dashcam by John's body. She knew police were on their way and that she was needed in the area of John's body to help with compressions and CPR. There are train tracks right behind the Alberts' backyard that they have become accustomed to sleeping through the noise. Their curtains were closed, and there were no sirens used by the police or the fire department. The Alberts had only been asleep for 3 hours after a long day, drinking alcohol, and a blizzard and windy conditions outside. By the time they were woken up, John's body was gone, and Officer Lenk was at their front door. Next reason 4, the Canton Police Department Sallyport garage videos are missing time, bad quality, and were altered by police to cover up that Trooper Proctor and other officers were tampering with Karen's taillight and possibly the hair on the back of Karen's SUV. Against that, the video is motion activated, so it's going to be missing certain time. The prosecution showed that police department videos before January 29th were also inverted. However, they failed to inform the jury of that before presenting the video, and although the writing on the vehicle was inverted, the timestamp was not. Most of all, Karen's taillight was proven to be damaged in 3 videos before police even had access to her SUV, so nobody in law enforcement even needed to tamper with it. Next reason 4, pieces of glass on Karen's bumper don't match the broken glass near John. One of the 5 pieces of glass found on Karen's bumper was consistent with one of the 2 pieces that Proctor recovered on February 11th, but was not a match for the broken cup near John. Trooper Proctor planted the glass on Karen's bumper. Against that, 6 glass shards from Fairview Road were a physical match for the broken drinking glass near John's body. That cup did not match 2 shards of glass from Karen's bumper, but the lab was unable to test the other 3 pieces of glass from Karen's bumper due to their size and condition was too small. All of the glass pieces were never fully recovered, so the 2 pieces that Proctor found could be a match to pieces that were never found. On February 1st, Hartnett collected the bumper glass. 10 days later, on February 11th, Proctor found a matching piece on Fairview Road, but had been to Fairview Road before that day. So why would he wait 10 days to say he found a match? Defense attorney Jackson insinuated that Proctor planted glass on Karen's bumper. Karen's car arrived at Canton Police Department on January 29th, and Proctor was there. Proctor was also there before Maureen Hartnett and Zach Clark arrived on February 1st to collect evidence and photograph the bumper. For there to be a conspiracy, Proctor would have to break a glass and place shards on Karen's bumper when he knew the police department had motion-activated video, and then claim to find 2 shards at Fairview, when on January 29th, he already thought there was enough evidence showing that Karen hit John. Police tampered with a hair on the back of Karen's SUV that testing showed likely was from John or someone on his mother's side of the family. The hair appears to be in 2 different positions in photos taken by the state police officer at Canton Police Department. In the against column, I admit it does appear to be in different positions. The only reason I could think of is Officer Clark pulled back the caution tape and let it go. Hair does not weigh that much, but neither does the caution tape. So I wonder, would the force of the tape being let go cause enough air to move toward the back of the SUV to move the hair? I doubt it, but I don't know. The rear SUV door was open and raised at some point, but I don't think photos of the hair were taken after it came back down, and that movement of closing the door caused the hair to move positions. I think it's important to point out the hair would have probably moved down from its original position when the snow melted from Karen's back window. However, this has nothing to do with the 2 different photo positions. Another reason against the glass conspiracy: why would the alleged Canton conspiracy crew inside the Alberts plant the glass that John took from Waterfall if it broke in the Alberts basement? It was found broken outside. Why not have Higgins throw it in the garbage at another location after some kind of altercation inside? Next reason 4, nobody saw Karen's SUV floor it in reverse, hit John, or make a noise outside. Against that, the party guests were talking and there was music playing. The front door was open, and even though some of the witness testimony during the trial mentioned who was sitting where at the table, but it is unknown who was at the table and in the kitchen and where they were looking when Karen's car went 20 plus miles per hour in reverse. If John was holding the cocktail glass in his right hand, would his hand have protected the glass from shattering at the impact and caused pieces to end up on the bumper? If the force was enough to break the glass, why did it not fracture John's hand? How did small pieces of glass end up on Karen's bumper? John read Jen's text while he was walking. In which hand did he hold his phone, and which hand had the glass? Against that, how else did Karen get that dent with paint chipped off? She had no explanation. There was some bruising on John's right hand, but that may have been from an IV inserted by paramedics. Defense expert Dr. Rentschler stated there were 9 punctures in John's sweatshirt's right sleeve, but 36 superficial abrasions on John's right arm. John's injuries are inconsistent with contacting Karen's taillight because the number of holes in his sweatshirt and arm wounds did not match. Rentschler said you would have to line up 36 different contact points to match, and they did not. The defense said the holes in the back of the sweatshirt were caused by the State Police Crime Lab testing. Attorney Jackson asked Rentschler, in order to penetrate the sweatshirt and cut the arm across, would the shards have to be going faster or slower than the arm? Dr. Rentschler replied, they would have to be going faster. If they're moving at a common velocity with the arm relative to it, they would somehow have to accelerate with more speed to catch up and go beyond the arm essentially. Jackson asked, is that physically possible? Dr. Rentschler said, no. Against that, there were over 40 pieces of taillight recovered near John's body. I don't know how many other cases there are where a 6'1" man was sideswiped by an SUV taillight going 24 miles per hour in reverse, but I would have liked to have seen more evidence from a prosecution expert that an SUV taillight could have caused all of the marks on John's arm. People say a taillight wouldn't even crack if John's arm hit it and Karen was driving 20 miles per hour, but the same people argue Karen going in reverse into John's car at about 1 mile per hour cracked her taillight. That was proven to be false. Jen texted and called John as part of a conspiracy and to find his phone by calling it to hear where it was ringing. Against that, if John went inside, how did he drop his phone outside near the flagpole if Karen dropped him off at the driveway? There is no evidence to support this theory. Did John see on his phone that Jen kept texting and he finally ended whatever argument he was having with Karen and got out, but Karen wanted to talk more, so she floored it in reverse to catch up to him? It makes no sense that Jen would send John those text messages if he was in the house. Even if John somehow was inside and there was a fight, that is not enough time to have the entire group come up with a conspiracy and have Jen pretend to text John like he never came in the house 3 minutes after John and Karen arrived. The 3 people in the pickup truck proved that John would not have even been inside the house at 12:27 a.m. when Jen texted John asking, here. Also in the against column, Karen said John got out of her car with a drinking glass, and part of the broken glass was found in the street and near his body, and a drinking straw was also in the street. If John did not get hit by Karen's SUV, how did his glass break and a piece remain in his nose? How did he get taillight pieces in his sweatshirt? Karen just happened to floor it in reverse soon after John got out, and he stopped moving within a few seconds. Most of John's injuries were on his right side, as if he was walking to the Alberts driveway when Karen floored it in reverse, and he didn't know she was going to hit him. Karen has no explanation for her SUV damage. Hitting John's SUV at 1 mile per hour did not break her taillight or cause the dent with paint chipped off. In the column for somebody else causing John's death, the videos of the ARCA test SUV going over 20 miles per hour appear to be very fast. So I wonder how Karen then slammed on the brakes on the road with snow and did not hit Higgins' Jeep if it was parked at the mailbox. And also that nobody inside saw that transpire if the front door was open. As I've said many times, John's phone location was always on the street or lawn and never inside the house. How does he get attacked by people or a dog if he was never in the house? John's phone temperature steadily declined once John left the bar, indicating he never went inside the Alberts home. 9 people in the house and 3 people outside said John never came in. How would the people inside Fairview even know that Karen's SUV went in reverse at a high rate of speed for them to even try and frame her for killing John with her SUV? No one said they saw her drive in reverse, but her car data proved it. After arriving at 12:24 a.m., John's phone only tracked steps for 85 feet from 12:31 and 56 seconds to 12:32 and 16 seconds, which was 20 seconds, but had no other movement until it was found under John's body near the flagpole after 6 a.m. At trial 2, the defense expert Matthew DeSogra argued the timing of the state's experts may be wrong about when John pushed the lock button on his phone for the last time, but the defense did not even argue that John was walking outside at that time at 12:32 a.m. or that he locked his phone at 12:32. So they said he was inside getting killed in the basement between 12:21 to 12:24, yet they did not bring that up when arguing this other later point. The distance from John's body near the flagpole to the front door was measured at 72 feet. It's impossible for John to have walked inside, gotten attacked by friends he just hung out with at the bar, and then dragged to the flagpole in 20 seconds. Karen's SUV had taillight damage and a dent, and she talked about it before backing out of John's garage and bumping his car at 5:07 a.m. Why would Jen text the question here to John at 12:27 and then pull behind me at 12:32 if they were together inside? John read both messages and used Face ID to unlock his phone, and then his phone never moved from the flagpole. The federal investigation examined whether local police compromised the investigation into John's death. It included expert reviews and witness interviews, but concluded with no charges filed. After Karen called Jen in the morning, Jen's phone records show that she called John, Julie Albert, Nicole Albert, and Tom Beatty. If she knew John was dead on the lawn, why would she even bother waking up these other people? I'm sure some people will say it was part of a conspiracy, but there is no evidence of that. Next in the reasons for column, Brian Albert upgraded his phone, so that means he turned in his old phone, the day before a legal filing stating witnesses should preserve their phones, and he did not even tell the prosecution he had already gotten rid of it during a call telling him and other witnesses to preserve their phones. Brian Higgins also got rid of his phone. Against that, the request by the defense was later denied by the judge. Higgins testified that he changed his phone after a suspect he was investigating called him. Months later, he threw out his personal phone after the judge ruled he did not need to save it. He said his work phone had more important information on it. Also, Higgins provided his text messages with Karen and John, and when compared to the phone extractions of Karen and John's phones, it showed Higgins did not delete or try to hide any of those messages. In the for column, people say Chris Albert grabbed Higgins' arm while leaving Waterfall, and Higgins motioned to John, and that indicated they were planning to hurt John. Also at the trial, the defense was arguing Higgins and Albert were sparring in the Waterfall, and that was practice for them to later attack John. Against that, eye roll, get real. That's so stupid. In the for column, Chris and Julie Albert took photos in front of John's house and taunted him that they were on his property. Against that, if there was such animosity, why did John bring his nephew to the restaurant owned by Chris on January 28th and exchanged phone numbers planning to meet up later, and they hung out amicably at Waterfall? Some people argue that the SUV key cycle information was misrepresented by the prosecution, and Karen's SUV went in reverse at 24 miles per hour when the tow truck driver went in reverse at her parents' house, and Karen's tires spun in the snow, indicating it went over 20 miles per hour, but it was not. Against that, the data showed before the trigger event of 30% throttle, Karen's SUV was traveling at 13 miles per hour going forward. That did not happen in the surveillance video from Karen's parents' house. Finally, Jen McCabe lied about everything. Against that, her Google search was proven to be at 6:23 and 6:24 a.m., not 2:27 a.m. Although her 7 phone calls to John that she does not remember making appear odd, the alternate theory that she was doing it to hide John's murder makes no sense. The various suspicious things about Jen's statements don't answer the even larger number of suspicious facts that point to Karen being guilty. I reviewed points in my spreadsheets that are for and against Karen hitting John with her SUV, but this section is how I think a collision scenario could have played out chronologically and logically. Around New Year's, Karen saw an interaction with John and a family friend in a hotel lobby in Aruba, which she misinterpreted as a kiss and yelled at John and the woman. 2 weeks later, Karen kissed John's friend, Brian Higgins, while John was in another room at John's house, and later texted she wanted to hook up with Higgins while complaining about her relationship with John. 2 weeks after that, on January 28th, John got mad at Karen for taking his niece to Dunkin' Donuts for breakfast, and he hurt Karen's feelings because he did not approve. Between 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., Karen called John 18 times trying to talk about the relationship, but he only answered 3 times and texted, "Oh my God, stop calling." So they mostly argued on text about the relationship, and when I read those text messages, I thought, these two should not have been in a relationship. Karen was frustrated and insinuated John was not into the relationship anymore and asked if he was seeing somebody else. Karen texted, quote, "I think it's clear me around with the kids around is slowly killing our relationship, and our relationship is much more important to me," end quote. John texted, quote, Sick of always arguing and fighting. It's been weekly for several months now. End quote. So there was a massive amount of tension and uncertainty about their relationship that day and night. They ended up hanging out at 2 bars, but were surrounded by people. Once Karen had John alone in her SUV, it was her first opportunity to discuss her issues with John after he avoided her calls. Karen pulled up to the Alberts house and has lied, stating that John got out of her car at the driveway and she saw him walk through the Alberts side door. In reality, a pickup truck turned onto Fairview Road right after Karen, and they stopped at the driveway and never saw anyone get out of Karen's SUV, and at the trials, they estimated they were there between 4 to 7 minutes, depending on which witness. Karen and John would have seen the headlights of the pickup truck parked behind them. Karen may have thought they were other party guests who wanted to park on the street, but not block the driveway, so she moved up from the front door to the flagpole and beyond. While parked in line with the front door, Karen certainly would have seen the front door was open, with people looking out while she faced John and they were talking. Once Julie Nagel started walking back inside, the truck left and the passenger said Karen's interior dome light was on, but they did not notice John in the car, indicating an open passenger door. Did John see that the lights from the truck finally moved from the driveway, and he took that as his cue to finally exit Karen's car? We don't know exactly when the pickup truck left, but at 12:31 and 47 seconds a.m., John's phone would have lit up that there was a second text message from Jen, and he started walking 9 seconds later, which indicates to me that he saw Jen repeatedly texting him and he was tired of arguing with Karen for 7 minutes while people inside the party wondered why they were not coming inside. John read Jen's text message 19 seconds after she sent it, then locked his phone while he was walking the final steps of his life. At the same time, Karen floored her SUV in reverse. Karen seems to have a short temper based on her history of yelling at John in person, on text, and in voicemails, giving the middle finger to Brian Higgins as he drove by, telling Marietta Sullivan to go F herself in Aruba, and screaming at other people the day she found John dead. Based on their text messages from that day, was Karen frustrated again that John avoided fully discussing their relationship problems while they were in the car? After John got out, did Karen start to leave, but decided she wanted to continue talking, so she angrily put her foot on the gas pedal in reverse to catch up to John? Her SUV data points to this scenario. Karen drove forward at 13 miles per hour. Then she put it in neutral for a half a second, then reversed while stepping on the gas pedal at over 70% throttle up to 24 miles per hour when her car slightly decreased speed and had steering wheel movement that could indicate sideswiping John. And seconds later, John's phone never moved again. As someone in the Delphi murders case once stated, at some point in time, coincidences cease to be coincidences. How did Karen and John go from lovey-dovey at the bar 30 minutes earlier, yet 5 minutes after the last steps of John's life, a few feet from where Karen was parked, Karen screamed in a voicemail that she effing hated John. After he got out of her car at a party they were both invited to, but she drove away angry, called him a pervert, and said no one knew where he was, when she knew where he was, but had not bothered to ask anyone else. Karen has stated she was angry in her voicemails to John because he went inside the Alberts house and did not come back to tell her it was okay to come inside the party, and he did not answer her phone call while she was parked outside. But the data and 12 eyewitnesses proved John never went inside the Alberts house, and Karen never contacted him while parked outside, despite her comment that she did. The subject matter of her voicemails to John do not align with her initial statements to police that she dropped John off because she had stomach issues, or her various stories in TV interviews. The voicemails to John should have been asking why he never told her it was okay to come inside the party. Karen's solution to her boyfriend disappearing into an unknown house was not to call or text John while parked outside, or to go to the door, but to drive away and leave him at an unknown house at 12:30 a.m. during a January snowstorm, and then, less than 10 minutes later, leave voicemails that she effing hated him and accuse him of being a cheating pervert. 'Cause that makes sense. I understand why John O'Keefe used the eye roll emoji when responding to Karen's statements. It really makes me wonder, with all these people who say Karen is innocent, did they take the time to really analyze Does this data, with John opening his phone with Face ID, only looking at text messages from Brian and Jen, and then locking his phone, did they take the time to actually analyze if that actually makes any kind of sense? Or were they just too busy shopping for pink clothing to support Karen, who was the person who found John dead and immediately said, "I hit him"?
Did I hit him? I know I said I hit him, but did I really say it as many times as law enforcement's claiming I said it?
Karen woke up around 4:30 a.m., acting like a lunatic, screaming uncontrollably because her boyfriend, who she cheated on 2 weeks ago, wasn't answering his phone and was not home after she left him at the Alberts. Karen woke up John's niece, who said Karen, quote, was just pacing down the hallway, asking what could have happened, saying, "Maybe I did something, maybe a snowplow hit him," end quote. John's niece heard Karen's morning calls with Jen, and Karen changed her story multiple times that morning, and in years later, initially stating that she and John got into an argument and she dropped John off. Karen called Jen and said she and John got in a fight and left him at the Waterfall Bar. But Karen told the TV show Nightline years later that she saw John walk to the side door of the house of people they just hung out with and were invited to hang out with even longer. Karen's mental state that morning and statements did not align with a person who saw her boyfriend happily walk into the Alberts house. Her statements about what unfolded outside 34 Fairview Road don't add up to a rational person or to the facts of car and phone data and 12 eyewitnesses inside and outside the Alberts house. If Karen was that mentally unwell at 5 a.m., how sane was she and able to drive in reverse after John got out of her car 4 hours earlier? At 5:05 a.m., Jen told Karen she saw her SUV outside the Alberts house, not the waterfall. So 2 minutes later, Karen started her car. Did she immediately confirm the Alberts address with Jen and then drive straight to 34 Fairview Road like a normal person desperate to find a missing loved one? Nope, not Karen Reed. She drove to the Waterfall Bar and around town for about 30 minutes before arriving unannounced to Jen McCabe's house, screaming Jen's name outside around 5:35 a.m. Karen's behavior was not rational. Or, to put it another way, she was a hot mess express. This was all before John was found dead. But Karen told Kerry at 5 a.m. that John was dead and got hit by a snowplow, but also said she could have hit him and talked about her damaged taillight. Karen never called hospitals or the police, but John's friend Kerry did. Karen insisted that Jen and Kerry drive to the Alberts house because for some reason, Karen was not capable of driving there alone. If Karen was so desperate to find out where John was, why didn't she take 4 minutes to drive back to the Alberts house around 1:15 a.m. when she couldn't reach John on the phone? Maybe she was afraid to discover that he was still on the ground or police would be there, which was backed up by evidence that DNA matching John was on Karen's taillight, and there were red and clear plastic pieces in John's shirt consistent with Karen's taillight, and one of John's hairs was near the taillight. Karen admitted to picking pieces out of her damaged taillight before finding John dead and showed Jen and Kerry, but that surveillance video is missing, which benefits Karen, not the police. Also, John's hat and one shoe were not on his body, which is common in vehicle pedestrian strikes. Most of John's injuries were on his right side, and Karen's SUV just happened to have a broken right taillight, scratches near the right bumper, and a major dent with chipped paint on the right side. But Karen had no explanation how that damage occurred. The morning John died, in the hospital, Karen told her father, "Dad, I think I struck something. I remember backing up and hitting something." In the prior 12 hours, Karen's SUV went in reverse a few times. The three-point turn in someone's driveway on Cedar Crest, which has no obstructions to back into. Then at 24 miles an hour, in front of the Alberts house soon after John exited her SUV, and John's phone never moved again soon after that. At 5:07 a.m., she reversed out of John's garage and hit John's SUV at about 1 mile per hour, which Dr. Welcher proved was not possible that Karen caused the taillight or dent damage at 5:07 a.m. Also, that was likely the first time in 2 years of pulling out of John's garage that Karen hit John's car, despite having a backup camera and audio alerts that she was about to hit John's car. She knew she hit something, had a cracked taillight, and maybe thought intentionally tapping John's car on security video could help if she got in trouble, but the expert's laser analysis proved her wrong. After that, Karen, Jen, and Kerry drove past the Alberts flagpole, and Karen screamed to let her out because she saw John. Kerry and Jen were confused because the ground was covered in snow and they did not see John. Karen repeatedly asked, could I have hit him? Did I hit him? And when asked about John's injuries in the first 30 minutes of finding him dead, she repeated, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. She repeatedly asked paramedics if John was dead, even after she tried to do CPR and pretty much knew he was dead, because some kind of official confirmation would mean she would be in more legal trouble than if John survived the accident, which I do not think was intentional. Karen's statements to police stopped when she did not want to cooperate in trying to find out who killed her boyfriend, never gave them her cell phone password, but she had no problem repeatedly talking to reporters. Just like her text to Brian Higgins a few hours after John's death with 2 words, John died, no effort at all to find out if Higgins had any kind of insight into what happened to John after Karen allegedly saw him walk into the Alberts house where Brian Higgins was. But a few hours after that text, Karen told police she did not see John walk into the house. So that makes sense why she did not ask Higgins for help. Karen only said she saw John walk inside years later when talking to journalists.
I see him go to the door and start to cross the threshold. And I look down at my phone, and in a matter of seconds, I look up and he's not there.
Because I guess she thought that information was not helpful to police investigators and getting true justice for John and his family.
Now I just want to save myself, and I just want to be who I was before this. And I care less about fighting for John.
Karen made no effort to offer consolation to John's family or work with them to find his real killer. But Karen has no problem doing rude impressions of John's grieving mother, who just lost her second child to an early death.
His mother leans over the kitchen island and says to me, I think he looks like he got hit by a car. He looks like he got hit by a car.
Within hours of John's death, Karen told John's sister-in-law that Karen had to remember the bad times with John so she wouldn't be sad that he was dead. Karen has no problem blaming John for going into the Alberts house and not reporting back to her, making him look like a jerk when he's not here to defend himself and tell his side of the story. But from data and eyewitnesses, we know John never even went inside the Alberts house, so Karen's story trying to make John look bad only makes her look bad. And Karen had no problem threatening Jen McCabe.
Jen McCabe, it's me or her. Either I'm going down, Jen, or you are.
I do not understand Karen's behavior and her statements at all. Frankly, after spending over 600 hours over the past 4 months looking into this case, I think Karen is a total jackass. But it took a while to realize that. And I've tried to be open-minded in analyzing actual facts, and the facts point to her being a total jackass. Karen threatened Jen, either I'm going down, Jen, or you are. Obviously, Karen ended up not going down in her 2 criminal trials, and time will tell about the civil case and Karen suing Jen, and what proof Karen will present that Jen was responsible for or covered up an attack on John. Good luck with that. Karen told so many lies, I made a separate video titled, Karen Reed Lie Detector Test. Why does an innocent person need to repeatedly lie? I'm not making up these accusations. She's on video making contradictory statements. If you're not telling the truth, you're lying. I think what I just reviewed are very convincing facts pointing to Karen being responsible for causing John's death in a collision scenario. That makes more sense to me than Brian Albert beating up John because he had a desk job at the police station, despite John hugging Brian Albert and Brian Higgins at Waterfall, or the theory that Brian Higgins was so infatuated with Karen that he murdered John, or a high school senior, Colin Albert, attacked a Boston cop and won, while John's friends stood around and did nothing, when data proved Colin and John weren't even at the Alberts house at the same time, or the theory that the Alberts German Shepherd repeatedly bit John's arm from the middle of his upper arm to the middle of his forearm, but there were no dog bites under his arm or any other part of his body, and the notion that the dog transferred pig DNA from eating a pig ear, but did not transfer its own dog DNA, saliva, or hair. Plus, John's phone's center GPS location accurately placed it on the road for the entire drive from Waterfall to the Alberts, but his location never showed inside the Alberts house to get attacked by people or a dog. John's phone data showed that he only walked around 85 feet for 20 seconds after he got out of Karen's car past the flagpole, after sitting in her SUV for over 7 minutes, and his body was found past the flagpole, which is 72 feet from the Alberts' front door. It was impossible for John to walk in the house, go down to the basement or garage, and for his phone to return to the flagpole under his dead body. In another section of this video, I detailed how it made no sense for people in the house to repeatedly put John's phone up to his dead face after they killed him just to read text messages from 2 people who were inside the house. I don't think so. I also don't think that 12 people inside and outside the Alberts' house agreed to cover up an attack on their friend John, who was also a police officer. Some witnesses were not related to the Alberts, the McCabe's, or Brian Higgins, but some people claim the conspiracy included all 12 of those people, plus several paramedics and police from local and state agencies all conspiring against Karen, despite the federal investigation not finding a conspiracy. To me, the scenario of Karen angrily flooring it in reverse after John stopped their argument and walked out makes so much more sense than John being attacked in the Alberts' house, and that is what the data points to. After all of that evidence, how would I vote if I was on the jury? As with all trials, I would obviously be elected the foreman because I'm organized and a freak in the spreadsheets. If I was on the jury, I would have voted the same as the jury in Karen's second trial. Did anybody just scream, "What?" after I just said all that evidence against Karen? Yes, for charge 1, murder in the second degree, I would vote not guilty. For charge 2, manslaughter while operating a motor vehicle under the influence of liquor, I would vote not guilty, but a lesser charge of operating a motor vehicle with a blood alcohol level of 0.08 or greater, like the jury, I would vote guilty. But for charge 3, leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death, I would also have to vote not guilty. I know that is probably shocking to people who are still awake after listening to my reasons why I think Karen is responsible for John's death, but I can't ignore the testimony of about 5 doctors who have a lot more experience and knowledge than I do at determining causes of injuries and death. Although I don't think that John was ever inside the Alberts' house to be killed there, many experts testified that John's injuries were not consistent with a vehicle strike, and the taillight damage was not consistent with hitting John, and would not have damaged John's sweatshirt the way it was, but also caused so many marks on John's arm at the same time. Although I felt like ARCA's 24-mile-per-hour test did show similar taillight damage to Karen's SUV at 24 miles per hour, and I think every accident has many variables, that it is impossible to say a certain scenario could not have occurred. I admit I'm conflicted because, as I pointed out, John's DNA was on Karen's taillight. His hair was nearby, there was a dent that aligns with John holding his broken drinking glass, and there were likely taillight pieces that were red and clear in John's sweatshirt. And Karen's SUV was proven to have major taillight damage before the police had a chance to tamper with it, but even though Dr. Welcher's paint test showed the location of John's arm injuries were likely in the same area as John, I don't feel like the prosecution successfully proved it. If they had another expert, or Dr. Welcher, show an example of how a taillight could leave a variety of marks somewhat similar to John's right arm, in that case I definitely would have voted Karen was guilty, along with all of the other evidence that points to her guilt. But the prosecution has to prove she is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and I have enough doubt about John's right arm marks and how a taillight could leave that pattern over a sweatshirt at an impact of 24 miles per hour without fracturing or bruising his arm or hand. So I would not feel comfortable sending Karen to prison for a few years. However, I would gladly send her to prison for a few years for her rude impression of John's grieving mother. In no way do I think Karen has been proven innocent, but that is not the job of the defense. In her TV interviews, I think Karen has proven herself to be guilty more than innocent, and maybe the civil trial will have a different result. So, what's next in this case? Karen, the Waterfall Bar, and C.F. McCarthy's bar were sued by John's family for at least $50,000 in damages. The accusations are wrongful death and reckless conduct by Karen for driving drunk, and over-service of alcohol by the 2 bars. The complaint also accused Karen of causing severe emotional distress to John's niece when Karen woke her up screaming that something had happened to John, but the judge dismissed that specific claim involving negligent infliction of emotional distress. At a hearing on September 22nd, 2025, Karen's attorneys made a surprising announcement. Her attorney said they plan to sue the Massachusetts State Police, Lieutenant Brian Tully, Yuri Buchanan, former trooper Michael Proctor, and Karen will accuse the state police of conspiracy, civil rights violations, and negligent training, supervision, and retention of troopers. She also plans to allege civil conspiracy and civil rights violations against Brian and Nicole Albert, Jen and Matt McCabe, and Brian Higgins. She's going to accuse the people inside the Alberts party of diverting attention away from themselves towards Karen and stating that they collectively conspired to ensure that what happened in the house was not explored and investigated. But Karen stopped cooperating with the police and did not provide her cell phone code, which resulted in police not getting access to her phone for like 6 to 7 months after John died. Karen hindered the investigation, but is now accusing other people at the party of doing the same thing. Also, the Canton Police Department could be accused of negligent failure to secure the garage where Karen's SUV was held in police custody. The judge anticipated a 2027 trial, but encouraged settlement talks. Several lessons can be learned from this case, including me never doing another deep dive. Don't drink and drive, and that includes all the police officers and other adults involved in this case who drank alcohol and then drove. Also, John and Karen should have ended the relationship before January 28th, 2022. If you're in a relationship that isn't working, move on, or else it might progress to a dramatic ending like it did for Karen and John. Finally, thank you to all of the people who spent a lot of time researching this case before I did and shared your files for others to view. Thanks for watching.